Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 6th of August. Today, sabotage. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has accused Keir Starmer of sabotaging her efforts to end the migrant channel crossings, using, she says, a web of cronies.
And Harry and Meghan have snapped up the rights to turn a best-selling book into a movie after them being ditched by Spotify for reportedly failing to meet productivity requirements.
And angry Greek locals have launched what they're calling the towel movement on British tourist hotspots. They say their beautiful beaches have been taken over by sunbed hoggers. And some tourists, other tourists, really have nowhere to go now. We'd like to know, go on, confess, have you ever been a sunbed hogger?
Confession, I have. And how will the weather look like for today? It's got to be better than yesterday. Here's Rachel Ayres from the Met Office.
It was an unsettled start to the weekend with Storm Anthony crossing the UK, but it looks like a drier and brighter second half for us across the UK. Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
Well, it's lovely to be with you today. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Dorby, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
So you have been a sunbed hogger?
Well, not only that, Anne, I must confess, I deploy my children like Fagin. I send them down
to
early
put
doors
towels on sunbeds
before breakfast, and I even direct them from the balcony. No, not that. Yeah, that. Great. So I send the kids down because they wake at the crack of dawn, and their penalty for that is go and get me a lounger. Must confess, I do it.
But you see, that's not so bad in that what you're doing is just claiming your right early. Yeah. But would you hold on to that sunbed if you had other things to do and leave it vacant with your towel on it for maybe hours?
Yes.
Oh,
yes, I would.
You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, during a lunch break or a siesta. I want to make sure, if I get there early doors, that's my territory. That's
not
my
for the entire day.
I'm afraid it's finders keepers. I get very, very edgy about this. I need me space. I need to get it sorted out.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but it's not right. You must feel guilty about it, surely.
Not remotely, because...
When you leave to go for a lunch or a siesta, for heaven's sake, a siesta, you leave your stuff on and you walk away, do you not feel other people looking at you and judging you?
I tend to wear the sunglasses and just walk quickly.
So you're ashamed?
Yeah. Well,
you feel a sense of shame in what you do?
But I hide my shame behind sunglasses. But a paperback novel that you don't mind if it gets stolen, a towel, there's a hotel towel.
You yourself feel it. If you haven't sent the children out at the beginning and you're looking out from your balcony and you're thinking, oh, I really want to spend the morning in the sun, and you look down there and all the sunbeds are already taken, does that not fill you full of despair?
Well, that's why I send the kids down early. I get ahead of the tsunami.
Yeah, but you know how appalling it is that people do it, and yet you're doing it yourself.
If you can't beat them, join them. You
see, that's what I wonder, that there probably are. I don't think I have, and I've certainly never left it for hours, because I feel so guilty. Well... Anyway, people would say, there's Anne Diamond, she's done it. And nowadays, they take a film of you, wouldn't they? But I can understand why you have to fight back. If so many people are doing it in the hotel or the beautiful beach where you are, if everybody's doing it, then in a way you just have to join in. Otherwise, you're just the Nelly that gets left sitting on the sand. And
if you remember, there's that excellent Carling advert from years ago. It became a national thing. The Brits, the dambusters versus the Germans.
Yes, it was.
Became a national sport. And it's still akin with football.
I am shocked to find that it is still the case.
Yeah.
If you've ever been a sunbed hogger, what's your defence? Or did you feel ashamed? And we'd love to hear from you if you were one of the people evacuated from Greece, from Rhodes, for instance, because of the wildfires. Because their Prime Minister, who is Kyriakos...
Go on, you're doing well.
Mitsotakis,
that's it,
has said that if you were one of the people who had to be evacuated, you were affected by those wildfires, he is offering you a free week in Greece.
It's an astonishing story.
Next year. He said he's obviously offering it in the off-season.
In the spring or the fall, spring or autumn, not peak season, but nevertheless, it's a free week in Rhodes.
I think it's an amazing offer.
Brilliant. I mean, there were 19,000 people in total evacuated. So however many of those were Brits, we don't know. If you were one of them, then get in touch, because it looks like the Prime Minister is giving you a free week in Greece.
Give you a free
Fantastic.
week. And I think that's a brilliant move because tourism is their main industry.
Bread and butter, yeah.
And so they've got to get back and say, it's all right in roads now, come out and see us anytime, free week. And how many people would probably extend that as well once they're out there? And also, I mean, it's such a wonderful place and it's so historic. There's so much to see that it doesn't matter if you were going in the off-season, actually.
I think on the first and foremost, what a fantastic piece of PR.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great gesture.
Fantastic.
Secondly, it sends out the message, we're open for business. You know, don't worry, you know, life goes on. And a free week, Anne, that's absolutely
I know.
huge.
I think it's just brilliant, actually. So would you go? Or are you worried there will be wildfires in the future? Oh, and weather is the other thing we're going to talk about a lot today.
Yeah.
How were you affected yesterday? Both of us in our separate homes sprung leaks yesterday.
Yeah, I had a leak from the window onto the table and my veneers lifted, which I've now got to use an iron to get back down. I quite like doing things like that, actually.
I've got a bay window and there was a leak. It was water running down the side. So I put a jug underneath it, half a jug full of water.
That's a lot.
That's a litre jug, so it's half a litre of water.
That's a big leak.
That is a big, worrying leak. Yeah, so how did the storm affect you yesterday? Love to hear from you. I think we've got better news ahead, though, from the weather, especially if you read the front page of the Daily Star there.
It is.
They report that people have actually spotted a shiny ball of fire in the sky.
What's that thing? What's that bright
Don't
thing
know
in there?
what it is, but, you know, but they also saying that apparently the weather is really going to warm up during the week, at the end of the week anyway, and we're going to have proper sunshine and heat at the end of the week.
If we believe them.
Yeah, well, we'll look into it and try and find out whether that's really the case. Because when it's on a Star front page, you never quite know what to think, do you?
Yeah.
What was yesterday's story?
Yesterday was Joe Pasquale was impaled by a moose in Skegness.
Yeah.
Which took a lot of trying to get your head around. In fact, I don't think we managed it.
No.
During the entire show. But anyway, the weather's back. Hurrah
The
for
weather's
that.
back. Would you consider going to Rhodes if you'd been, if you'd had to evacuate because of the fires? Would you go back? And what was the other thing?
The first one.
Yeah. I can't remember now. Oh, no. Have you been a sunbed hogger?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's
and
the national
how
pastime.
do you justify that? I'd love to hear from you. GB Views at gbnews.com. Yeah.
You got it.
Should we move on?
Yes.
The Home Secretary has accused Keir Starmer of trying to sabotage her attempts to end the illegal immigration crisis.
Yeah, Suella Braverman claims the Labour leader has a web of cronies who are blocking any effort to stop small boat crossings from Calais.
Which begs the question, which political party would you trust to actually get anything done about this? We're joined now by John Ashmore, the editor of CapX. Good morning, John. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
That's the big question, actually. It's almost as though nobody, either side of the political divide, seems to be able to actually get anything done about the migrant channel crossings.
Well, the onus is certainly on the party who are actually in government to do something about it. Personally, I think whatever your views on the topic, that blaming the opposition for your policies not being executed properly strikes me as pretty weak tea. And if you read the detail of Suella Braverman's sort of accusation, we're talking about a woman who's a lawyer who was a member of a task force advising the Labour Party. And there's another thing about a Labour councillor who works for a sort of pro-asylum group. This does not amount, in my view, to a web of cronies. It's a couple of people. Obviously, the Conservatives are trying to play on the idea of kind of lefty lawyers who don't like the Rwanda plan and so on. And perhaps there's something there. I think this does resonate with some people. But my overall view is that if you've been in government for more than 13 years, then you have to carry the can for your own policies. They've already got the Nationality and Borders Bill, which was which was passed last year. We've got an illegal immigration bill going through now. It's ultimately up to the Home Secretary herself and her colleagues to carry things through. There's also an element, I think, of some people think that there's a sort of cynical element, which is that they always knew there would be this kind of legal backlash, and that was part of the plan in the first place. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I could see why people do think that.
Well, John, we saw a couple of weeks ago after the Uxbridge by-election, it came out of CCHQ that they were looking for these wedge issues to create deliberate points of difference between the Tories and Labour. And to be fair, Braverman is not only accusing her of the Webb cronies, she's directly attacking Starmer in this exclusive today, which is on the front page of the Sunday Express. She's saying that Starmer has successfully campaigned to halt this government's attempts to deport vile foreign criminals, including rapists and murderers, which is a total betrayal of their victims. She's, of course, referring to a flight in 2020 destined for Jamaica. This is pretty feisty stuff. Do you think this is going to set the pattern for this topic now ahead of the next general election?
Yeah, I think, as you say, after the Uxbridge by-election, there was a piece in the Sunday Times just after that about how, the Conservatives were changing tack and going for more of these kinds of, some people call them kind of anti-woke, but I think it's broader than that. I personally don't think it's a great tactic. I think that people are more concerned about bread and butter issues at the moment, particularly inflation, the cost of living. I think if you are talking about, Keir Starmer's attitudes or whatever to a flight 3 years ago, and people are wondering why they can't pay their bills and so on, they may wonder why you're talking about that and not the more pressing matter. But yeah, I don't think we should be too kind of pearl clutching about this. Politics has always been a bit of a blood sport. There are plenty of people who say this is perfectly fair game. Labour will go after Tory politicians in exactly the same way, and it's always been thus. I just wonder whether it's actually, whatever your scruples, whether it's actually going to be an effective electoral tactic, particularly when you think that Rishi Sunak's whole, reputation and presentation since he's been Prime Minister has been of the competent, calm, steady hand on the tiller. If he now switches and tries to become a kind of culture warrior, it looks a bit strange. He also just doesn't, to my mind, he doesn't have that sort of, if you like, energy about him as a politician. He doesn't come across as someone who is deeply invested in the culture war or in these sorts of issues. So I wonder if there's an element of kind of authenticity that's lacking there as well.
Mm. And it's worth pointing out, to echo your point, Anne, if this is a question of capability, it's OK for Braverman to attack Starmer. The fact of the matter is we had a record amount of crossings in July. 3,299 people made the journey in 63 boats, an average of 52 migrants per vessel. So it's all fine and well for the Conservatives to attack the Labour Party. The fact of the matter is a key pledge, one of those 5 pledges, John, was to stop the boats. And on that, the Conservatives are measurably failing.
Yeah, that's exactly my point, Martin. It's that, they've stuck their colours to the mast with, as you say, with those 5 pledges, some of which seemed quite unambitious at the time. Halving inflation, everyone thought, oh, that'll be easy. And it's not proving the case. So it's a good example of, be careful what you wish for. But yeah, as you say, it's their asylum system at the end of the day. It's funny, if you go on, I did a bit of research about the illegal immigration bill, and if you go on the government website, on their own website, it says the asylum system is broken. Mm. If you're saying that about your own system, then people are going to wonder why you're trying to blame it on the opposition.
Absolutely, especially to turn around and say that the system is broken when you're the people who've been in government for the last 13 years. They might have a point if they'd only just got into government, yeah. But, for 13 years they could have fixed it. And now they seem to be flailing around blaming the other side. But equally, Labour last night came out saying that the Tories aren't doing the job properly, they haven't made a success of this. So although you say it may not be top of the issues for the next election, it's certainly going to be in there. And I just wonder what voters are going to feel when they are about to cast their vote. If this issue is important to them, who would they trust most to get anything done about this? What do you think?
No one is my honest answer. I think there's a complete kind of systemic long-term failure here. Some of it's kind of logistical. There just aren't enough staff processing asylum claims. I should just say, I don't think it's not a priority for voters. I think stopping the boats is really clearly a priority for voters. What I question is whether making these sort of slightly spurious accusations about the opposition is a good tactic. I think focusing on it and saying that, they don't have a plan, for example, is perfectly legitimate. And I think a lot of people will look at Labour and Keir Starmer and say, he is clearly not passionate about this issue. He doesn't really seem to have any alternatives to the Rwanda plan. I think, stick on the substantive stuff. And there's a perfectly legitimate argument to be made. But, saying that there's a kind of plot or a web of cronies, to me, just sounds a bit sort of desperate.
Yeah, prove it is the response, really, isn't it? John, thank you very much indeed for joining us so early in the morning, this Sunday morning. Thank you.
Yeah, and it does raise... You raised an excellent point there, it's about trust, it's about capability, and I disagree with John. I think it will be a huge issue.
It is for some, particularly in some areas of Britain. Right. I think it's an enormous issue.
The Red Wall.
Yeah, well, the Red Wall, but also if you live anywhere near where they're planning to sort of house migrants or in some way, I think you start to feel very strongly about it. Yeah. And while you want there to be a proper, just, fair system, but there doesn't seem to be any system at all at the moment.
It seems to be completely broken, and I think that's a central point. So, the takeaway from this is...
Did it ever work, though?
Well, it's escalated and escalated.
Broken. Maybe it never really worked and it's just sort of escalated out of control.
I mean, it was the number one topic that drove the Brexit referendum all those years ago. I mean, for a decade at least now, we were denied a proper conversation. Then Brexit came, take back control. That hasn't happened.
No, it hasn't.
Here we are again. I tell you what, Anne, it feels like Groundhog Day sometimes on this topic.
It really does, and you wonder whether, in 10 years' time, if we're still at it, we'd be talking about exactly the same thing.
But we will.
I don't know, be a bit tired by then. But do let us know, actually, if you were about to put your tick in a box at an election, and this issue is important to you, who do you think you can trust most to actually get anything done about it? Love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, how about another subject that might get you going? COVID. It seems that COVID has disappeared from our daily life, but experts are warning that apparently we are flying blind about how infections could play out this coming winter, this autumn.
Yeah, and they've also warned the decline in surveillance of new variants could put extra pressure on the NHS, cases increasing across the country.
Joining us now from West Yorkshire is data and COVID expert Tim White. A very good morning to you, Tim. Do you agree that actually we are sort of flying blind into what could be another crisis?
Good morning, both of you. Yes, I do, to be honest, Dan. There is a distinct lack of monitoring, so therefore a distinct lack of data. There's just pretty much circumstantial evidence, and we can track hospital admissions. We don't really know how deep COVID is running or will run in the future. And I think another good point is that we don't have enough data year on year. It's still a very new disease in medical terms, and therefore we cannot say with certainty the sort of things that we can about flu, and we can make quite a good projection of how many people will suffer from flu and how busy our hospitals will get. And the fact that COVID has gone down in the headlines and all the restrictions have been eased, of course, including in that many people won't realise is that we are just simply not doing the depth of research that we used to do, the monitoring. As I say, the Office of National Statistics used to give very good figures about how many people were infected. And from that, we could extrapolate how many people would become very ill and how many people would need serious care in hospitals. And it's all to do with trying to ensure that our hospitals don't have another crisis this autumn and winter, as you suggested.
Yeah, Tim, it's important to maintain a sense of perspective when we talk about things like this, because, of course, COVID gets everybody scared again. When we look at the average deaths at the moment, it's very low, 63 the last 7 days, and that's with a 26% decrease week on week. So it's good to be mindful, but we don't want to get into the realms again, do we, of scaring the bejesus out of everybody.
No, absolutely. I think it's important to say that. I think this is pretty much a debate that's being had by experts, and some of the newspapers may jump on it and say, try to cause some hysteria almost. But you're absolutely right. It is still a disease, and it will still keep kill people, as will flu, as will a lot of other things. But there isn't a pandemic. What we do worry about is, as has been said for, 3 years now, and maybe we'll be talking about this subject for the next 10 years as well, the possible emergence of new variants. And it is important to find those early. It is important to find out whether the vaccines that we have work. And the big unknown coming into this winter is a lot of people probably won't get another booster, will just think that it's gone away now. And will that contribute to a rise, and a dangerous rise? But we're not talking about, thankfully, the likes maybe of you and I or most of our viewers, but it's the most vulnerable, the very elderly, those with compromised immune systems or comorbidities. But yet at the moment, it is at a very low level. We have to say that. But when schools go back, when colleges go back, when people return after summer holidays, having done a lot of mixing with other communities abroad often, that's when we could see the biggest rise. And as people start to mix indoors more and more, as we say goodbye to this glorious summer that we're all enjoying right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, thanks very much indeed for that. It is important to say to everybody that we don't want to scare anyone, but, you know, it just seems so weird to be talking about it again. It has become a bit of a toxic subject. People have got opinions and their own very, very fierce opinions about COVID now. And so we're not... It's never going to be the same again. We're not going to stand, are we, for anyone from government saying you shall not go out, you must wear masks. People now have an opinion about that, and they'll do what the heck they think is right. The only thing I think people who are very, very worried about it are those who've got old or vulnerable people at home and are worried for them.
And that's all fine and proper. I think people now, I mean, have had so many boosters, but I think you're right. If we saw a return to any form of lockdown or even mask mandates, I think there'd be like mass non-compliance.
We'd all have a very different reaction to it now,
I think we had a long time. But look, it's great to stay informed and to stay safe.
Hey, absolutely. Now, you want to know about the weather? I want to know about the weather because there are thoughts that it might actually be getting better. Oh, it's August. Should we find out?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Well, today will be more of a day of sunshine and showers with lighter winds around than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday's storm Anthony is already moving away to the southeast but could still bring some cloud and blustery conditions to parts of East Anglia through this morning. Elsewhere, we'll see cloud and showers soon bubbling up, and these could be heavy in a few places across Scotland, northern England, and with a chance of the odd thunderstorm across Northern Ireland. We're feeling much more pleasant today as well compared to yesterday, with those temperatures just creeping into the low 20s in the south. Now, as we go through the rest of this afternoon and into the evening, we'll see those showers starting to ease, becoming more confined to northern areas and plenty of clear spells around. Now, with clear spells and lighter winds, we'll see those temperatures dropping just a little bit more readily tonight. So towns and cities generally clinging on to those double figures, but more widely seeing temperatures into the mid-single figures in rural areas. This will mean it'll be a bright but chilly start to the new week. Plenty of sunshine around. There could still be the odd shower developing, heaviest across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. But with those light winds and that sunshine around, feeling even more pleasant as we go into the new week, with those temperatures just starting to climb a little bit more into the 20s, with a high of 23 in the southeast.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, don't forget, we'd love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.com. There's plenty to be talking about today. Imir, he absolutely confessed to being a sunbed hogger.
Totally.
And you didn't seem that much ashamed, I have to say.
I'm actually secretly proud of it, and now publicly proud of it.
Well, it's because you feel you're fighting back against something that's unjust in the first place.
Take back control.
But more and more of these hotels and resort managers should have a pool man who goes around and says you're only allowed to hog a sunbed for 2 or 3 hours, and then we will remove your belongings.
Yeah, but you can bribe those people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know too much about this.
You can buy them a couple of beers in the evening and say, that's my stuff. Yeah, okay, sir. Si, senor. Yeah, I've got all the angles.
The sunbed hoggers. Have you ever been a sunbed hogger? Don't you feel ashamed? Or do you feel that you were pushed into that behaviour because everybody else is doing it?
Yeah.
And after all, you have you've paid your money for your holiday, and if you can't, lie on a sunbed and enjoy the sun.
Yeah, the
Do
Germans,
you remember the sun?
The Germans started it, and we had to fight back. So.
Well, that's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
I think that could be very, very awkward.
Don't mention the war.
I'm sure you will have... Well, it is a war. It's an ongoing war at the moment. I don't know who are the worst people at it, but I'd love to hear your view on it. If you've got any good stories, do let us know, because we need a bit of cheering up this Sunday morning. You know, the weather's not cheered up yet, so we need you to help us. Please do. I always love to hear where you are watching us and how and why. So do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com. We'll be back with you in a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning to you. If you're just joining us, it's 6:26, but you probably don't need me to tell you that. The alarm clock's probably told you that. We've had our first email. The very first email of the show is from Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia.
Wow.
Morning, Anne and Martin. We're watching you from Phnom Penh, and that's from Gary. Thank you so much, Gary. What an interesting place to be.
Good morning,
Do you
Cambodia.
live there? Are you visiting, or what? And would you hog a sunbed? Oh, dear, Martin, I have to tell you that you're not going down... Your behaviour is absolutely appalling.
Yes.
According to... where is it? Ross.
Yeah.
Morning, Ross. Ross says, I'm sorry, but putting your towels on sunbeds to hog them is ignorant and scummy.
Well, Ross, I've been called worse, but I do admit it's a great divider, you know. But I just think if you can't beat them, join them. And I'm going to come out and proud. I deploy my children like the Artful Dodger. I send them down. Do it before breakfast. Breakfast is your reward. If you can't beat them, join. But some of these people here, Anne...
But he hogs the sunbed, maybe via your children, and then keeps his stuff on that sunbed while he goes to siesta.
I do. Or even a day trip sometimes.
What?
Yeah. I want somewhere to come and have my sundowner. Look, especially if you get the guys on the payroll who take care of the towels by the pool.
Oh, sorry, no, that's not on. That really isn't on. Ashley's been in touch. Hi, Ashley. He said, while me and my mate were in our 20s, we visited Mallorca, and if we were out for a night out, on our way in, we'd get our sunbeds for the next day ahead.
See, I've got standards. That's a step too far.
Oh, really?
The night before... I mean, you know, the night before is too much, and it's grown adults, grown men. You can use your children, but a grown lad shouldn't be doing this.
Tony in Suffolk would probably agree with you. He says, we've all done the towels on the sunbeds before breakfast, and yes, we leave them there while we go for lunch. Early birds get the worms. We've been doing it for years. Too many tourists, not enough sunbeds.
Touché, Tony. I'm completely with you on that. You know, you've got to get ahead of the tsunami. And here's one here. Tim says, well, why not hug Why hog sunbeds? Get out and explore the place you're visiting. Explore the culture. Well, that's a good point, but you can do both.
Well, you can do both. If you hog a sunbed and then you go off and look at a pyramid or something, you know, that's not on to keep the sunbed away from somebody else.
Why not?
I ask you. I think that's terrible. I really do. How was your day yesterday during the storm? Juliet says, for us professional gardeners, the summer is our busiest season, so the storm was really hindering work-wise. But on the plus side, the soil is softer after all that rain and makes weeding easier.
I've got to say, Juliet, I'm actually of an age now where I like it. I always say, oh, it's good for the garden. And I laid some turf. And it's resplendent, it's verdant. My lawn has never looked better, so in many ways, thank you for the rain.
I used to have AstroTurf and I had it pulled up over the winter, and I put turf down. And grass grows, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it needs mowing, and it grows particularly under this sort of rainfall.
It does.
And I haven't been able to get the lawnmower out to it. So it's about a foot high.
You're knee high before you know it.
Yeah, it's going to be impossible to mow. I'm going to have to employ a sheep or something. Anyway, at exactly 6:30, you're watching Breakfast here on GB News. Let's move on to a subject that really does concern a lot of people at the moment, and maybe we should all be concerned. It's about computers and AI, because computers can now already compose poetry, really good stuff sometimes, pass medical exams and write lots of computer code. But can they actually use their superpower to help us all to become rich and famous? We're going to be finding out about this now from our special guest here, because he knows much more about AI, I think, than any of us. He is actually a futurist and a great friend of the programme at the moment, Andrew Eborn. Lovely to talk to you.
It's a joy to see both of you.
Yeah, superb.
I mean, I've witnessed this, whichever programme it is that actually writes stuff for you.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And it's replacing journalists. So what's happening is in Australia, for example, they've got about 3,000 stories about local news is being written by AI. And what's
but not being made up, it's actually being reported
It's being written,
properly.
so they're getting the reporting, and it's been used for all sorts of things. As you say, it can compose poetry. We had songs being done. You've had the fake Drake collaborating with The Weeknd and so on and so forth. And it can be used for all sorts of interesting things. You get pictures done using AI. And you might remember the Pope dressed in a puffer jacket, and whilst the devil might like Prada, the Pope prefers a puffer. So it is really, really interesting stuff. But there's a couple of things which have happened. Every day there's an AI story. And what's happened is good old Elon Musk and the Musketeers, he's just bought AI.com. So it now means...
The domain name.
The domain name. Yeah. And he bought it from OpenAI, and they bought it previously for about $11 million. Wow. So just for a domain name, it is tremendous. But you've also got these whole things about what's going to happen with the toy market and so on and so forth. So this Christmas, I predict that virtually all toys will now have an AI element. And every day we...
What sort of things?
Well, you've got, like, interactive... Many years ago, you might remember there was Barbie. Whatever happened to her? So it's always a thrill.
Screen.
But they had, they had this sort of a toy which you could talk to. It was called Hello Barbie. And it would basically learn about your child and everything else, and there were security concerns. I can tell you, in the same way as we've got sort of people are concerned about China will use electric cars and be able to monitor you in today's Telegraph, you're going to have exactly that sort of stuff with these AI toys. Because what will happen is you'll develop a relationship with these toys. You'll chat to them about your life and so on and so forth, and they will get to know the child a lot better than a lot of other people.
That's not a great leap of faith, like Tamagotchi started that back in the 90s. But this story is fascinating. So the Turing test.
Yes.
The Turing
test is basically where a mathematician in the 50s said when AI or when a computer can converse and pass as a human, would have passed the kind of tipping point of not being able to tell the difference between machines and man. This story is pegged on the fact that a new Turing test is AI's ability to make a fortune. And the test is this. Give AI $100,000. Can it turn it into $1 million by speculating?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And it was a report in the Times on it, and that's based. And Alan Turing, who appears on the back of a £50 note, he was the guy who in the thank you, have those. I printed it this morning. it's going to be good. The principle was this: is that if you could fool somebody into thinking they were dealing with a real person, that's what Alan Turing said with his brilliant mind. Then basically that's past the imitation game. This new test, which is about artificial intelligence, can it make a fortune? turning around and saying, it's great, you can do poetry and stuff like that. If we give you $100,000, could you make that into $1 million?
Yeah.
And they talked about basically coming up with products, coming up with marketing campaigns, using that sort of stuff. So it's for a power for good.
Even opening bank accounts.
Even opening bank accounts.
Can AI open a bank account with Nigel Farage can't?
Not with Coots it couldn't, but, but it might be able to. No, it's that sort of principle, because they need to be able to run a business. And I always say that AI...
But if we're talking about it here, somebody must be already doing it.
They are already doing it. So the reality is exactly that. And as you know, I talk around the world about AI and its possibilities. It's understanding what the technology can do. It is an incredibly powerful tool. And every single day you get basically principles, you get great stories and threatening stories about AI and so on and so forth. But you also get some really powerful ones. And it was Stephen Hawking who said, it's our greatest human achievement, but also potentially the biggest existential threat. Yeah. And I think it's understanding those risks, understanding the capabilities that we can really, really do that. But I think using it in business, basically speeding up things like in the NHS. You know, we talk about waiting times. You talk about people not being able to chat to a GP. Well, ChatGPT will give you the time. It can give you basic information and some powerful stuff.
They've already tested that as well, haven't they? And they found that actually, if you talk to a robot GP, you're likely to get as good an answer as you would from a human GP, if not better, because it can do it faster. So it could cut down an appointment time down from 6 minutes down to 2 or 3.
Absolutely. And the University of California in San Diego, they did exactly that. And they basically got doctors to assess the answers given by a real GP and that given by ChatGPT. And they worked out it had more empathy and could be more accurate, because obviously it can spend more time and so on and so forth.
I've got one final question for you, Andrew, and that is this. If AI can make everybody a millionaire, will cash cease to have any value?
Well, it is interesting.
As you said earlier, Anne,
if you find... It becomes meaningless.
Well,
if everybody's got a diamond becomes worth it.
And the question is, what do you do with your time? And that's the interesting thing. And what I would, to finish on, to tie it all beautifully with your story about sunbeds, is that you can get VR headsets where you don't need to worry about towels and so on and so forth. You can travel the world, which is not just good for people who can't get away very late, very good for people who are very lonely at home and so on and so forth. So one of the great stories in today's paper is exactly about that, about VR headsets, how you can be taken into a different world and you're going to experience the pyramids, and you don't need to send Martin down with his towels early in the morning. So it will get you
same, though. That will never be the same.
Lie on a sunbed with a headset and look at the pyramids. It's quite the same thing.
Yeah, don't know whether to worry about it or not. What do you think? gbviews@gbnews.com. Andrew, thanks very much.
Always a pleasure.
Indeed. Right, stick with us. Coming up next, we're going to be looking through the Sunday papers.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Oh, welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. We've already got some lovely emails coming in. We'll go through them a bit later on. Actually, sticking up for you as a sunbed hogger.
Oh, nice.
Apparently, according to Grant, at Sandals, if you go to Sandals, the resort, if you have a butler, apparently you can pay for a butler. You can get your butlers going to the beds at Sunbeds at 6 a.m. and putting towels and books on them and hogging them for you. And you can have a little reserved sign, apparently.
How the other half cheat.
And Grant says tips count, if you get my drift. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I send the kids there free.
I'd love to have a butler service.
Butler at Sandals?
Yeah, very posh.
I got called ignorant and scummy earlier.
Yes, but if you've got a butler, you're not ignorant or scummy, you're just rich.
You're a posh hog.
Shall we have a look at the front pages of the Sunday papers for you? Let's go to the Sunday Telegraph first. China will use electric cars to spy on Britain. That's one to think about.
Nice bit of conspiracy. And in the Express, as we've been talking about already this morning, sabotage. That's the accusation against Keir Starmer that he's trying to stop plans to stop the boat.
Meanwhile, The Independent accuses the Tories of cooking the books to cut official asylum numbers.
And the sensational Stairway star reveals a shiny ball of fire has been spotted in the sky. I know, a strange thing, saying summer is finally set to arrive with a 30-degree heat blast. And those are your front pages.
Right, let's look inside, or all around them, actually. Now, joining us this morning, editor of Spiked, Tom Slater, and author and broadcaster, Nikki Hodgson. Thanks very much for joining us. First of all, are either of you a sunbed hogger?
Nikki, come on.
Tom and I were having a chat about this in the green room, weren't we? Well,
go on,
I'm not, but what I was saying is I don't like it when people leave the towel on for the whole day. I don't mind the morning, banking it and being on it, but then when they leave the whole afternoon and being British, I find it so hard, you know, I could just technically take it off and put my own on, couldn't I, and use it, but I don't feel able to do that and I feel really resentful.
Yeah.
I did it recently, 2 weeks ago when I was in Greece for a few days. I sat there seething, looking at a bed, I was thinking, you're not coming back, but I can't take it.
And like a true Brit, you did absolutely nothing about it.
I sat there steaming in my own head.
I can't bring myself to do it now. I can't, you know, deploy children or butlers or anyone else in between. It just feels... Because I, like Nikki, would be the person seething with rage.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It can spoil your holiday. Right, Tom, though, take us to the front page of the Telegraph about the fact that if we're all going to buy electric cars, and we could possibly be buying them from China, we could face a problem.
Yeah, so concerns have been raised with ministers about this because of the fact we have this target to make sure that no new diesel or petrol cars are sold by 2030. The problem is there isn't the domestic production to build these things. There's been a few gigafactories, as they're called, pop up, but not nearly enough. At the moment, we're buying a lot of them from Germany, but it seems like China are really roaring ahead in this particular area. And so it would be expected that many of the cars that would be bought to meet this target would be from China. The issue with this, is, of course, is not just electric cars, but a lot of cars in general have all kinds of technology in them. They have these things called cellular modules, which are tracking your location data. They can record audio. There's all sorts of different functions. And the concern being that this could be in some way harvested, hijacked, even some concerns about being able to just kind of shut off a nation's cars, etc. It's worth saying that at the moment this is kind of speculation about what might happen. But at the same time, it's kind of meeting those concerns about saying, ultimately, do you really want to be overly reliant on any kind of external actor, particularly an authoritarian state, for something which is a key part of your infrastructure, which this, of course, would be?
On the one hand, it's a slight kind of silly season conspiracy theory story. On the other hand, though, Nikki, it's true to say that while the world was asleep at the wheel, pun intended, China hoovered up most of the world's lithium, now makes most of the world's batteries, so they're absolutely strategically placed to make this sort of move.
Yeah, but I mean, we had this story. Do you remember when Huawei, when Huawei phones are first introduced and people were like, oh, don't buy one because you're being spied upon, you know. Every time we have a story about China providing us with some kind of technology, we revisit this theme. You know, most recently we've been talking about TikTok and whether, we should be on that. So, it's frustrating, actually that it kind of keeps coming round, because actually what we really want is the evidence. Are we being spied on by China? I mean, how much do we know about the information that's being passed back? I mean, interesting, there was that story recently about Tesla. Do you remember Tesla employees that had been recirculating footage of people from their cars in the office? So we know that there are humans behind the technology who are potentially viewing the material. And so from that point of view, well, that's actually quite realistic as a concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I just think what we really need is there's a lot of speculation at the minute about China and what China can see us do, and we need some more facts about what is actually happening.
I think that's a really important point as well, because a lot of it is sheer speculation. The one thing that I'm always struck by in these areas is that the way we get ourselves into a situation where on a particular type of tech or a particular type of resource, we're overly reliant on, say, just one state. We saw that in relation to Russia and Europe, obviously, and we see it in relation to China and a lot of tech currently. And a lot of concerns over Taiwan, because if China ever invaded Taiwan, that's where the vast majority of the microchips that are in almost everything we own these days come
and when you think of the fact that we're already talking about self-driving cars, you know, cars that we'll just call up on an app and they'll come to your front door and you just get in the back, read the paper on the way to work. That, if some state decided to shut that down completely because they'd put a chip in that car, I mean, can you... it would not just be inconvenient, it could be deadly. So we're right to heed this warning, aren't we?
And just being overly reliant on any kind of one external actor, I think, poses a problem, whether or not they're going to exploit these problems or even if they're just going to, for other reasons, not be able to supply you with that good at a certain point. It's obviously not good policy.
Should we move on, Nikki, to an FOI request by the Mail on Sunday into the ongoing scandal, of course, kick-started by Nigel Farage, GB News, when he had his bank account terminated by Coutts. But now it's been revealed in this FOI, 1 million bank accounts have been shut since 2019.
Yeah, so the Mail on Sunday has obviously done an investigation off the back of what happened to Farage, and it's kind of looking into the people that have been debanked. Now, it's important to talk about being debanked is different to being unbanked. We've got a lot of unbanked people in this country, so it's people that have never had a bank account and that, you know, they're vulnerable for lots of different reasons. But being debanked is when the bank actively decides to shut your accounts, and for any number of reasons, which are often only privy to the bank. You know,
they don't have to tell you why.
They don't have to tell you why, and it seems that it's very subjective, the decisions that some of the banks are making. It's quite interesting that Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has said that he was refused a bank account with Monzo, the online bank. I've got an account with them, actually. And he said he was refused it because of his public profile. So it's not just... I think there's this attitude that it's the old-fashioned bank, because it was Coutts, you know, it's banks of heritage that are making these decisions. Actually, no, new banks are just as likely to do it. So we obviously need to really understand why they make these decisions, because there must be internal documents about why a bank account has been shut, obviously, because at the end of the day, banks want to make money, and if someone's got money, they're more likely to take it than not. But I mean, I find this interesting because a few years ago, I was working in America. Martin, you'll remember this. I was writing a lot about the sex industry and about the porn industry, and one of the stories that I kind of wrote about there was how people who worked in the adult industry routinely had their bank accounts closed by American banks like Wells Fargo, gold rush banks, you know, not exactly banks that were set up with ethical money, let's say. And that was kind of a really interesting story, but because it was strictured to such a sort of maybe a group that is kind of marginalised anyway in society, people never really cared. So, I mean, I'm interested kind of like following on from that. When you see sort of everyday people or political figures or, you know, people that society considers to be more prestigious being debanked, then it becomes really worrying. And I just think it's the fact that the banks are making decisions that you don't know about. And also the point that's made in this article is... AI, again, is making a lot of automatic decisions about who should have an account and who shouldn't. And I've always found that with banking, that the fact, you know, the past sort of 10, 20 years, the fact that you can't talk to a person very easily at all, especially about complicated things like personal loans and stuff like that.
And it's an astonishing increase because the previous amount they had was only 343,000. That's still a lot of accounts.
Yeah, it is.
But a third the number. So we've seen a tripling of this phenomenon. Astonishing
So
stuff.
according to this, the banks have closed 1 million accounts in just over 4 years. But the rate of closures is accelerating. So
that's what we've got to watch.
Going on?
Yeah, we've got to really find out why.
All of those people who said, "Oh, it's just Nigel Farage talking about Nigel Farage," it is so much bigger than one person.
And it's going to be a big problem for them as well when you see those Facebook groups popping up about people who've been debanked. They're all sharing how to do subject access requests, as Nigel Farage did, to find out why. This is going to be a big problem for the banks because they're going to their own process is going to be gunged up with people trying to ask, understandably so, why has this happened? But they've only got themselves to blame.
I wonder if there'll ever be a case like with the personal loan thing, where actually money will come into this. Whether if you've been debanked, you can actually prove that it's affected you, affected your business. You could actually sort of sue for compensation.
I think that could well be the way it's going.
Really
some sort of class action. And what I think is going to be an emerging strand of this story is they're cancelling people who trade in cash. because they don't want people to have cash. You know, it can't be, it can be hidden, it can't be taxed, it can be, and I think that's going to be a big sort of run-of-the-mill window cleaners, you know, chip shop owners are being debanked because the banks don't want us to have cash.
Absolutely.
So it's one to watch.
Absolutely. One more. We've got time, I think, just for one more. Look at the universities in crisis because lecturers and students are going on strike.
Yes, so this is just the ongoing crisis which has really been non-stop since 2020, really, where you had, first of all, you had the COVID years. You had students who were paying those exorbitant fees and yet they were locked up in their halls of residence, only really taught on Zoom. On top of that, you then obviously had the universities' lecturers' strikes action, which on the one hand, you know, these people are suffering under the cost of living crisis like anyone else. Junior academics in particular have not had a real particularly fair shake. Like many areas of the economy, they have also had kind of real terms pay cuts over the course of the past 12, 15 years anyway. But the problem is you combine that with the experience of the COVID years and students are understandably quite upset given the fact that they're, as we've seen in recent weeks, graduating without even having a grade necessarily. All of these kind of problems. So there's now 140,000 students at 17 universities who have joined a class action looking for compensation.
You can't blame them, can you?
You can't blame them, Nikki. I mean, people pay £9,000 a year during lockdown to be locked in their hall of residence staring at a screen.
Absolutely.
They're thinking, where's the VFM here? And now, read the room lecturers, they're going on strike to further kind of rob students of their education. It makes you wonder if they're completely out of touch with the educational needs of the students.
Well, I think what's interesting is, you know, I come from a family of educators, not necessarily university workers, but what's interesting is, you know, I absolutely defend their right to strike and to kind of argue for better conditions and terms for themselves. But I think it belongs to kind of a previous era of being a lecturer because the business model of universities has changed so much now that surely lecturers have to approach how they strike differently as well, if that makes sense. So I think, I think they're not likely to get much public sympathy, to be honest.
No,
That's not a reason not to strike, but, you know, it's important to promote.
OK, Nikki Hodgson, Tom Slater, superb. Great talk today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk, let's cross to Ireland now. The home of the former Foreign Secretary, Lord Castlereagh, it's called Mount Stewart, opens to tourists in Northern Ireland this summer, over 200 years after his death.
And he was the Minister for War during the Napoleonic era and reshaped Europe by overseeing the Acts of the Union and the end of the 1812 American War. Our legendary Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, has paid a visit.
All of us are only here for a short time, but the roads and structures left behind are portholes into the past, and some of us achieve much more than others. Lord Castlereagh's life was played out on a world stage and would leave his mark to this very day. Castlereagh was born into the Stewart family in Dublin, although he spent most of his life right here in Mount Stewart. He lived in extraordinary times and would rise through the political ranks in Britain.
He felt intensively Irish. At the same time, he felt that Ireland deserved to be a part of a bigger and more powerful unit, which was at that time the British Empire. He saw in the Napoleonic Wars how the British Empire could not only ally itself with Europe, but also lead Europe.
Peter Lawrenson is married into the Stewart family and is a historical expert on it.
He felt of himself much more as a diplomat than a politician. It's one of the reasons why the King proposed that if Lord Liverpool resigned, the King, George IV, would make Castlereagh his Prime Minister. And Castlereagh said, no thanks. Thank you very much, Your Majesty, but no thanks.
As well as appointing such men as Nelson and Wellington, he set up unthinkable coalitions and ensured the Pope that all the Vatican's wealth would be returned from Napoleon's armies.
As Secretary of War, he had put together a thing called the Sex Coalition with Britain and its allies against Napoleon. That is to say, the armies of Imperial Russia, the armies of the Austrian Empire, and the armies of the Prussian Empire. And in the course of that, he became personal friend of the monarchs involved, the Tsar, the Kaiser, and the King of Prussia.
The boy that grew up in Newtownards would set in place the Acts of the Union and end the American War of 1812.
And even more remarkable for an American like myself, It was he who brought to an end the War of 1812, which many of us have forgotten about. The principal negotiator for the end of the war from the American side was a remarkable man called John Quincy Adams, became America's 6th president, and he said, "I bring this war to an end because I trust the word of Lord Castlereagh." This is a very little known link between America and Northern Ireland, but an important one. Because as much as the Congress of Vienna prevented the British from fighting any wars on the continent for 100 years until the First World War, it is also the birth of the special relationship, because no British army has had to fight an American army for 200 years, right down to the present day.
Doogie Biddy, GB News, Mount Stewart.
And that will be a lovely place to visit this summer, won't it? I tell you what, if you inherited a beautiful country pile like that, what would be the first thing you'd do? I'd get rid of all those old paintings of old men on horses, wouldn't you?
Well, isn't that part of the heritage? That would be like
it is. I'd put them in a separate room or something. That's the thing I find most sort of, I don't know, almost depressing about some of those big old country houses, is those blinking paintings of men sitting on horseback.
Staring down at their eyes, following you. But, you know, they're part of the heritage.
I know it's part of the heritage. I know it's sort of the history, and that's how you transmitted your importance, wasn't it?
That's right.
You were a man, first of all, and then you sat astride a horse and with your guns and the foxes that you just shot or something.
And you paid an artist to make you look far more handsome and slim than you actually were.
Absolutely, yeah. Right, I'm very lucky to live about 100 metres from the beach, says Steve, in sunny Torrevieja, but I rarely use it. Get down on that beach and absorb some sun.
Great pronunciation. And we had Cambodia as a viewer earlier, Susan, close to home, watching you from Battersea Park with my dog, Rudolph, and I love the show.
Good name for a dog, Rudolph. I really like that one. Anyway, keep watching, and do keep getting in touch with your views, gbviews at gbnews.com. Are you a sunbed hogger? You can confess to us. You can tell us your story about how to beat the sunbed hoggers. Coming up in a few moments.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Well, today will be more of a day of sunshine and showers with lighter winds around than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday's storm Anthony is already moving away to the southeast but could still bring some cloud and blustery conditions to parts of East Anglia through this morning. Elsewhere, we'll see cloud and showers soon bubbling up, and these could be heavy in a few places across Scotland, Northern England, and with a chance of the odd thunderstorm across Northern Ireland. We're feeling much more pleasant today as well compared to yesterday, with those temperatures just creeping into the low 20s in the south. Now, as we go through the rest of this afternoon and into the evening, we'll see those showers starting to ease, becoming more confined to northern areas and plenty of clear spells around. Now, with clear spells and lighter winds, we'll see those temperatures dropping just a little bit more readily tonight. So towns and cities generally clinging on to those double figures, but more widely seeing temperatures into the mid-single figures in rural areas. This will mean it'll be a bright but chilly start to the new week. Plenty of sunshine around. There could still be the odd shower developing, heaviest across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. But with those light winds and that sunshine around, feeling even more pleasant as we go into the new week, with those temperatures just starting to climb a little bit more into the 20s, with a high of 23 in the southeast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 6th of August. Today, sabotage. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has accused Keir Starmer of sabotaging her efforts to end the migrant channel crossings, using, she says, a web of cronies.
Harry and Meghan have snapped up the rights to turn a best-selling book into a movie after they were ditched by Spotify for reportedly failing to meet productivity requirements.
And angry Greek locals have launched what they're calling a towel movement on British tourist hotspots. They say their wonderful beaches have been taken over by sunbed hoggers. And then other tourists have got nowhere to go. We'd like to know, and you could confess, have you ever been a sunbed hogger? It's surprising how many sunbed hoggers are watching the programme today, I have to say.
Or even presenting the programme, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, how will the weather look today? It's got to be better than yesterday, because here's Rachel Ayres from the Met office.
It was an unsettled start to the weekend with Storm Anthony crossing the UK, but it looks like a drier and brighter second half for us across the UK. Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
Well, whatever the weather, it's lovely to be with you this morning. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
We've got a lot of sunbed hoggers watching this morning. I am ashamed to say.
Yeah.
Woo. Yes, and some very strong opinions on it, actually, as well. Mia in Bali, very good morning, Bali, nice. Says Martin should take the sunbed with him and then take it back down again with him the next morning. What? In other words, take your own.
What do you mean, balance it on my head?
Well, they must make foldable, well, they do, we know they make foldable ones, so just take that with you. That's your equipment for your holiday.
Yeah, that's too much high maintenance. I like the ones that are there, those big plastic, they're nice and sturdy, they don't go anywhere.
No, you're right, yeah.
You know, make them my own. And Alan, I love this. Alan, my enjoyment with sunbeds was to watch for the German sunbed thieves putting their towels out and then swap them around while they had their breakfast.
Ooh, that's a good
And watch pandemonium break out. Alan, a continuation of the wartime spirit there.
That is a very interesting idea, because we've got quite a few people getting in touch saying they actually, they actually pick up all the towels and throw them in the pool.
What?
Which is one thing to do, but I think actually causing a bit of a ruckus by muddling things around, that is actually quite clever.
Rearranging the deck chairs.
That would cause war, though. I mean, people would get very upset about that.
It would kick off.
Yes, it really would kick off.
Fisticuffs.
Yeah. Chris says 100 guests, 100 sunbeds. Problem solved.
Yeah, this one has always struck me as a solution that isn't there. Catherine in Manchester, why don't hotels let you book your sunbeds with your room when you book your holiday? I mean, why not?
I don't think, when you think how many people are in the average tourist hotel, It would be several thousand.
There'd be too many.
Yeah.
There'd be
you can't put several thousand sunbeds around the pool. I suppose they would say, because not everybody wants to just lie on a sunbed by the pool. I don't know how you solve this one, but it is causing a real problem, isn't it? And it can spoil your holiday. If people are very, very good at it, so every morning when you come down, even early, maybe just after breakfast, you cannot find a sunbed to lie on. That can spoil your holiday. It really can.
Well, I've got to say, for me, that early morning frisson, it's part of the fun. You know, that kind of that antagonism, that
because
battle.
You're very competitive.
I like it all. Yeah,
you are. Yeah. And you've got a Nottingham accent. Did you know that?
I have, yeah.
Oh, that's all right. Phil in Nottingham says, "Keep hogging the sunbeds, Martin. Love your Nottingham accent on the telly."
Well, there aren't many of us.
Yeah, there are a few. Let's talk about one of the main stories bothering people today, and that's the migrant crisis, the Channel crossings. Now, the Home Secretary has actually accused Sir Keir Starmer of trying to sabotage her attempt to end the illegal immigration crisis.
Yes, well, Braverman claims the Labour leader has a web of cronies who are blocking any effort to stop small boat crossings from Calais.
Well, let's speak now to political commentator Stephen Carlton-Woods. Good morning, Stephen. This is proving to be a real... It's almost a toxic subject for both parties. They're both blaming each other for not being able to get anything done.
Well, if we look at the facts behind all this, with the Labour Party, it really is a web of deception, because all the people, there's a lot of people involved with Labour who are really at odds with what the government are trying to do. So Sir Keir Starmer's come out with this brash statement yesterday saying that they're going to sort out immigration quite quickly over a short period of time. But yet when we look at all the problems around the migrant crisis and what Suella Braverman has been trying to do, it's all full of Labour cronies that have been there blocking it. For instance, the Labour Party have just appointed a lawyer, Jacqueline Mackenzie, to help draw up the election manifesto. And Mackenzie is a director of Detention Action, a charitable company that brought legal challenges against the removal of asylum seekers of Rwanda. And also the Detention Action was recently run by Labour councillor Bella Sankey, who recently stepped down in May to take over as leader of Brighton and Hove Council. We can go on with Care for Calais. Susan Jecks, a member of the Care for Calais board and former chair of trustees, is a former Labour candidate who stood for West Sussex County Council in 2021. It goes on and on and on this. We've got law firm Doughty Street Chambers, where Sir Keir Starmer was a founding member, and its barristers there have said a number of its barristers have appeared in court to represent groups opposing the Rwanda policy. It really goes on and on and on. It's quite deep within the Labour Party, all what's been going on in the background, and they can't really hide away from that.
And, Stephen, another extraordinary line of attack. It's the front page of today's Sunday Express. They have this exclusive. Another attack from Braverman directly on Starmer, saying Starmer has successfully campaigned to halt this government's attempts to deport vile foreign criminals, including rapists and murderers, a total betrayal of their victims. She's, of course, referring to a flight in 2020 that was grounded on its way to Jamaica. There were 23 violent criminals on board. A couple of weeks ago, the Tories said they were looking for these wedge issues after the Uxbridge by-election. They're going for the throat on this. It's getting down and dirty. Do you think the British public will like that, or is this not very British?
Well, I think it's about time the Tories started standing up for themselves and bringing proper argument to the table. They've let Labour get away with this for too long, and there's lots. And the mainstream media let Labour get away with things for too long. Don't forget, Sir Keir Starmer was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, let loads of the rape gangs go free back in the day. So he's got a history of this sort of thing anyway. And we want to be looking at Sir Keir Starmer, and surely he's got questions to answer on why he talks tough on immigration, and yet so many of his allies are involved in trying to thwart the government's policies.
Yeah, and then the next question has to be, if Keir Starmer got into power, he too would face the same problems. He would be required to do something about these illegal immigrations. And how would he'd face exactly the same problems that the present government is facing?
Well, this is typical of Labour, you see. Criticise the government, they do everything to upset the apple cart. I mean, who are they really, who are their interests really at the end of the day? It's certainly not ordinary people's interests at heart here with the Labour Party. It's all about scoring cheap political goals just to try and get one over on the government. And it's not doing anyone any favours for that.
Yeah, Stephen, it's all fair and well for the Conservatives to steam into Starmer, but let's look at the numbers. They've hardly done a great job of stopping the boats or controlling our borders themselves. In July, a record 3,299 people made the journey in 63 boats, an average of 52 migrants per vessel. So it's fair and well to have a go at Starmer, but they've singly and spectacularly and measurably failed to control our borders. So who do we trust?
Martin, you're missing the point here. The point is, every time the government try and do something, you've got Labour's cronies involved in all sorts of different bits of action, stopping the government from doing all that. So if the government have constantly got the hands tied, every time they go to court, we've got judges overturning decisions. It's an impossible task, and it makes you wonder who's actually running the country.
And who should run the country. But we'll leave it there for the moment.
The people voted for a Conservative government, and the government have not been allowed to do the job.
Well, and that's my point, exactly. And if the people voted for a different government in a year and a half or so, would that different government be able to get on with the job at all? We'll leave it there for the moment. It's something, it's something we're going to be talking about pretty lot in the future, I think. Thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, and I think you're dead right. You're dead right. You can't just attack the opposition all the time unless you can actually take back control yourself. And I think people may well believe that neither of them are actually doing a good job.
Well, that's it. I mean, that was what the point I was trying to get at earlier is, and I'd love to hear your views, is if we were in a general election and you were about to tick one of the boxes, who would you trust most to actually be able to get anything done? Never mind what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
We know the practicalities now. Even if you come up with ideas like Rwanda and floating barges and, converting former RAF sites into places to put illegal migrants, what do you do when you're faced with a flotilla, that's probably not the right word, an army of human rights lawyers who we're paying to actually... It's in their interest to just eke it out, make it difficult. And we know there's even been some very bad behaviour from some lawyers on that too.
Precisely, but I still believe, and I think a lot of the electorate believe, that it's OK to blame deportation or where the migrants live or how we process them, but that the central premise of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges is to stop the boats, and they're not. That's all I'm saying. So they're arguing like rats in a sack, but do they actually have a solution? And I sometimes just think they don't.
Solution. They've come up with lots of so-called solutions, but they never seem to be workable. Anyway, it's Sunday. You don't need me to remind you. I hope you're enjoying yourself. Maybe you're still lying in bed, enjoying breakfast in bed. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, lovely.
But it's lovely to be with you, and there's lots to talk about. And it's funny, no matter how much politics, and I know it's sort of what we call silly season as well, there's a lot of different aspects of life to talk about. But I tell you what, Harry and Meghan are still in the papers, on many of the front pages, because people still talk about them, don't they? And have you ever heard of a book, a best-selling book, called Meet Me at the Lake?
No.
I haven't heard about it. Apparently it's a huge bestseller. And Harry and Meghan are going to produce a film of it for Netflix. They've bought the rights to this best-selling romantic novel.
Yeah, the book is about a couple who meet in their 30s, similar to the Duke and Duchess's real-life relationship. The news comes amid reports their star is waning in the US after Spotify spectacularly dropped them.
And maybe they say they see this idea as something to actually sort of relaunch them in America. However, they've just bought the rights to a book to turn it into a film, but all the writers are going on strike.
Yeah, great timing.
Maybe they'll write it themselves or get AI to do it.
Yeah.
Let's speak now to former BBC royal correspondent and friend of the programme, Michael Cole. Morning, Michael.
Good morning, Anne. Good morning, Martin. Yes, the California 2, their loveliness goes on and on. They're coming out of a new box here as film producers. They've bought the rights of this book for a reported £3 million. And, of course, there are echoes. There are parallels here. It's about 2 people who meet and fall in love in their 30s. They both come from fractured homes, check there. They both have suffered childhood trauma, check there. One of them has lost a parent in a car crash, another tick there. She has suffered from postnatal depression. There's lots of talk about mental health. And in addition to that, there's drug use. And of course, you can't read, if you're forced to spare the prince's memoir, without tripping over references to smoking weed and hallucinatory drugs and so on and so forth. So it's all there. All human life is wrapped up in this volume, and they're going to make a film of it. Not at the moment, of course, because Hollywood is strike-bound, but eventually they will. And this book has been written by a woman called Carly Fortune, who's a journalist turned author, and she lives in Toronto, known to the Canadians as Toronto. And but I'm not sure. Of course, that's where Meghan Markle did live when she was making Suits. And apparently, the book is full of steamy sex. Well, there was plenty of steamy sex in Suits, at least in one episode that I saw. So there we are. They're set to be the new sort of Samuel Goldwyn, Louis B. Mayer, film producers of the future.
Yeah, doesn't sound terribly convincing to me. Does it to you?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. You know, a film is as good as its production. It's been stressed that they're not going to be involved in front of camera. They're going to be the producers of this. It's quite a chunk of money. It's from, to pay £3 million in advance of that, and then you've got to get the whole thing together. But if it's a worldwide hit, of course they'll get their money. If it's another love story going back a few decades, of course they'll get their money back. But it certainly is. They've lost a big income stream with Spotify, who dismissed them with some degree of disdain, and they've had other income streams closed down. And as you said at the beginning, seems to be that America is, to some extent, falling out in love with them. The thing about America is they always want what's new, the novelty, what's next. This is the home of nostalgia. This is where the David Hasselhoffs and the other people come here to do pantomime. We're the great people who love the people who used to be. In America, they just want what's next. And if you're not what's next, coming out of the bandbox, then what are you doing here, sort of thing.
The big question, of course, Michael, is will the Sussex touch be the kiss of death or the kiss of life? Because let's face it, Spotify believed that would be the magic dust of guaranteed credibility and box office. It actually turned out to be complete kryptonite.
Well, it was terrible. And, of course, the man who was running it dismissed them as a couple of grifters. Well, that's American slang, which I think means confidence tricksters. And in other words, he was saying that they signed up to do all this stuff and they didn't do it at the end. And somebody else who was talking about her talent said, does she have any talent at all? I think I did watch Suits. I thought she was a good little actress, in a good little show. It was quite well written and tautly scripted, but she was sixth on the call list. She wasn't even the star of it. And that was the peak of her ambition. So at the age of 42, I think is what she is now, do people go back on the screen in Hollywood? Not many parts for people of 42, women of 42 anyway. So we'll have to see. I wish them well. I hope they do have some success, because obviously they have a hugely expensive lifestyle, living in their hilltop fortress there, guarded around the clock by security. 3 shifts of big burly men, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and 1 extra on leap year. That costs an awful lot of money, and you can burn through it very, very rapidly. Of course, they were wealthy at the beginning, and they've made money. The Netflix deal was worth more than $100 million. And don't forget that Spare, published back in January, is the biggest selling biography there's ever been in the whole world. That must have brought in a few shekels.
Yes, but they're spending it, aren't they? And they're mixing with people who've got far more money, the real Hollywood wealth. However, I mean, setting up a production company, which is presumably what they'd have to do, is quite an ambition. They've got no form on that. And the only form, actually, for anyone from the royal family setting up a production company is Prince Edward. And that didn't exactly set the world on fire, did it?
Oh dear, ardent. Oh dear, ardent. Made one or two. Dear old Desmond Wilcox, no longer with us, held his hand in that company. He made a couple of films on royal themes, Edward on Edward, which was him thinking about Edward VIII, the king who abdicated. And then, of course, it went bust. And people said at the time when they walked into the headquarters, you know, there were lots of leggy secretaries and a beautiful marble atrium and everything, and pot plants. And when you see all that, you know that the company is going to fail, because you actually have to make the money before you have the accoutrements of success. And that went down the Swanee River, as, of course, did his wife's PR firm, the now Duchess of Edinburgh. So the record of show business and the royal family is not one of an unalloyed success. But they've always been fascinated by it. Lord Mountbatten of Burma, he was absolutely fascinated by Hollywood. He went to Hollywood. He and his wife, they were friends of Charlie Chaplin and all the great stars of the 1930s and 20s, the silent era, Douglas Fairbanks and so on. So the royal family have always been fascinated by film in particular and show business, presumably because in a way, part of their shtick is being seen, is being out there, it is presenting themselves. And that's a very important part of majesty. You might want to deny it, but it's absolutely out there. That's what it is. And I wish them well. I mean, it's quite clear to me, and actually he's alluded to it, that Harry is in a way trying to live out the life that he thought his mother was going to have, because there were plans for her to move to Malibu with Dodi Fayed. They had it all worked out and they were going to go and live out there. And it appealed to her, Anne, because she felt that in America they'd give her an even break. You know, in America, particularly Los Angeles, celebrity is the currency. And there are so many celebrities. And if you're at Safeway, which doesn't exist in this country anymore, but does in America, and you're checking out your groceries and Kevin Costner is at the next checkout and you just say hello. Well, that's how it goes. People fit in. And Diana felt very strongly that after a while she would be able to fit in, and the Americans wouldn't bring to bear the pressure that there was in this country. So she was quite content to think of living there. And of course, she told her sons about that. So obviously Harry knows about that. So in a way, I think he's actually living out his mother's destiny, which of course she never fulfilled.
Yeah, but Dodi Fayed was a proven, very, very successful film director, was he not? Producer. He had
a lot of people don't go to Hollywood and do nothing. He did 6 films, starting off with Broken Glass, if you can go back as far as 1980. And then, of course, he was the associate producer of Chariots of Fire, which was the first British film to win 4 Oscars. And he went on and did FX Murder by Illusion, parts 1 and 2, and The Scarlet Letter, which I think was an extremely underrated film. I rather enjoyed it. And he was associate producer of Hook. And at the time of his death, he was about to make a new live action, not a cartoon version, of Hook, of Peter Pan. And in fact, I had arranged for the rights of that to be extended because they are owned by Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital in perpetuity. That was bequeathed them by the author, Sir James Barry. And he was going to make that, and he told Princess Diana all about it and how he was going to cast it and all the rest of it. And it was really strange that after her death, the first memorial to her, and perhaps the nicest one, was the children's playground in Kensington Gardens, which of course is all based upon Peter Pan, that wonderful story by J.M. Barrie.
Yeah. You can't help but think, if only, or, you know, or what if. Yeah. However, Michael, absolutely fascinating talking to you and hearing those stories. Thank you so much for being with us.
That was excellent.
It's my great pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't want to stop.
It does make you, but it does, doesn't it? It makes you think, oh, what if?
Yeah, it does, and it brings back sad memories. It does. You know, rest in peace, Dinah.
Yeah, absolutely. At 7:23, we'll take a short break.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Well, today will be more of a day of sunshine and showers with lighter winds around than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday's storm Anthony is already moving away to the southeast but could still bring some cloud and blustery conditions to parts of East Anglia through this morning. Elsewhere, we'll see cloud and showers soon bubbling up, and these could be heavy in a few places across Scotland, northern England, and with a chance of the odd thunderstorm across Northern Ireland. We're feeling much more pleasant today as well compared to yesterday, with those temperatures just creeping into the low 20s in the south. Now, as we go through the rest of this afternoon and into the evening, we'll see those showers starting to ease, becoming more confined to northern areas and plenty of clear spells around. Now, with clear spells and lighter winds, we'll see those temperatures dropping just a little bit more readily tonight. So towns and cities generally clinging on to those double figures, but more widely seeing temperatures into the mid-single figures in rural areas. This will mean it'll be a bright but chilly start to the new week. Plenty of sunshine around. There could still be the odd shower developing, heaviest across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. But with those light winds and that sunshine around, feeling even more pleasant as we go into the new week, with those temperatures just starting to climb a little bit more into the 20s, with a high of 23 in the southeast.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, whatever the weather, I hope you're going to have a great Sunday. If you're on holiday, and there are many people probably watching right now who are planning to go out and hog a sunbed, is it the right thing to do? Elaine says, I agree with Anne. People who save sunbeds for themselves and then disappear are very, very selfish. If they plan to come down immediately after breakfast, have a couple of hours and then move off to do something else, that's fine. But then they should remove their belongings and give someone else a chance.
Well, I mean, obviously I don't agree. I'm out and proud. As a hogger, Jax in Derbyshire says, I was shocked to see grown people doing this. It's like a bunch of selfish children hogging toys. I went to a resort once in Tunisia and saw it for the first time. Never been back again to a big resort holiday again. It was a disgrace. Well...
Catherine in Durham, Maureen Catherine says, we were in Rhodes 2 weeks ago and the sunbed situation was absolutely dreadful. People were not only putting towels on beds around the pool, but also claiming sunbeds on the beach. They went out as early as 5 a.m. In the end, by the third day, I joined them to get to bed.
See, that's what I'm saying. If you can't beat them, Jordan. Just goes to show, even when there are wildfires raging, people are anxious about sunbeds.
Yeah.
It's that big a deal.
It's a big deal if that's the sort of holiday you want. Why not, I suppose? Eek. It just seems so selfish going away, as you do, to go and have a siesta and still leave his stuff on the
holiday.
I don't know. Anyway, do stick with us. Up next, all the latest sports news with Aidan. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:30. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. And let's find out all the latest sports news now with my mucker, Aidan McGee, who joins us in the studio, smelling fragrance as ever. Aidan, boxing, another scandal hits the Joshua fight. What's going on this time?
Oh, goodness me, this is just dreadful for the sport. It's had a wretched year or so, certainly since COVID. But yeah, Dillian Whyte was due to face Anthony Joshua in their second fight they had one in 2015, which Joshua won. It was due to take place next Saturday at the O2, the headline act of a show that was going to last the whole evening, of course, including the undercard. And Dillian Whyte returned an adverse finding from a doping test yesterday from the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, VADA. We should say at the moment that Dillian Whyte issued a statement yesterday saying that this sample was done voluntarily. He's been picked up on this kind of thing before and then nothing's come of it. He's been found, he's been exonerated, and that he's completely innocent. And we don't actually know what the substance is. We won't know that until probably later today or maybe tomorrow. And then right now, the show is actually, they're hoping it will go ahead next Saturday. Just this fight is cancelled for now. They're hoping they can find an opponent for Joshua. But with a week's notice or 6 days' notice, they're going to have their work cut out. The contenders would be Filip Hrgovic, Zhilei Zhang, possibly Derek Chisora, we think might step in at short notice. But disastrous for boxing. I mean, we've seen Jake Paul this morning, an influencer, winning a unanimous decision. We've seen the rise of women's boxing. Those entities are filling the vacuum left by the men's sport at the moment, because with all the contractual wranglings that have gone on, which are stopping the big fights happening, that's really damaging for boxing. And when a sport gets bedraggled by drugs, as we saw with athletics 20, 30 years ago, sooner or later, advertisers, broadcasters pull away. It's not a good look whatsoever, but we'll get more on that as the day goes on.
Yeah, it just seems boxing has become so laden down with this wrangling. People are just getting bored of it and moving on to other stuff, which brings us on to the championship. Now, that started yesterday. I hear you had a bit of a, how should you put it, a rocky start as a QPR fan.
Yeah, we did. So our producer, Dean Spencer, and myself went to Vicarage Road to watch QPR play. He said to me, just as we were walking up to the ground, like 5 minutes before kick-off, he said, Aidan, I don't know what it is. We're up against it today, but I've got a really good feeling about QPR. Anyway, we were 1-0 down after 36 seconds, which I don't think I've seen a goal. There's Dean and I there. It's a bit shadowy, that picture. That's at Vicarage Road in the away end yesterday. We were 4-0 down at half-time. Watford took their foot off the gas in the second half, and we managed to just stay in the game a little bit. But a dreadful start to the season, question marks over the manager. But I said to Dean, you know, next time you get a good feeling, just keep it to yourself next time. Yeah. And don't jinx it. But I'll tell you what, I've not been away into QPR with QPR for a little while. Yeah. The support for GB News in there was incredible. Wow. You know, people come up to me and say, "Oh, I watch it every week on TV." It's wonderful. I wonder if they're picked up in the ratings.
Superb. Thank you to the Super Hoops fans out there. Now, today is the kind of the showboat, the show pony start to the Premier League season, of course, the Community Shield. What I think is interesting about this, Man City Arsenal today, it's normally the winners of the FA Cup versus the winners of the league. Yes. Well, City won both.
They did. So what happens then is that you take the runners up in the Premier League. They normally become the opponents. It's happened before. Yeah. City have won the double relatively recently. 4 o'clock kickoff today. A couple of injuries for both sides. We're not probably going to see the team that we're going to see the next month or so because Arsenal promised that there will be incomings and outgoings. They've got an injury to Gabriel Jesus, of course. Should mention Scotland as well today because our Scottish viewers have contacted us yesterday saying we don't give them quite enough mention. It's an interesting day in the sport yesterday. Celtic beating Ross County 4-2. That was Brendan Rodgers' first game in charge. A big surprise down the road at Kilmarnock. Rangers losing by 1-0. So that's already put Rangers on the back foot at the start of the season. Superb. And you got a quick bit of rugby for us yesterday? Hugely disappointing for England as well. Yeah, I mean, this is the warm-up ahead of the World Cup announcement tomorrow. It's a squad, 33-man squad. I mean, he said that Steve Borthwick said it wasn't going to be a warm-up for the World Cup squad announcement, but how can it not be? Yeah. 29 they lost at the Principality Stadium. Wales looking pretty good. This is a Wales side, by the way, earlier in the year lost all their Six Nations matches. England winning just 2 of theirs. So I don't know what sort of condition that leaves England for the World Cup, but they kick off on September the 9th in Marseille against Argentina. So all eyes on that, and we'll see what the squad announcement has in store tomorrow. I've got to say, I watched that match and I fell asleep. I've been on the early shift. They're not improving. They're not improving. It's as simple as that.
It's not good if you fell asleep, though, is it?
I just thought England were really just flabby and not really at the game.
You should have come to Watford with me. If a goal after 36 seconds would have kept you awake.
Well, it would have kept you crying. Quickly, so today, back to the Man City Arsenal. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They are tipped as the two frontrunners for the Premier League. Yeah, I think so. Today's match, though, it's a knockabout. Will it have any relevance on what we can expect from the Premier League season, which starts next Sunday, is it?
Yes, that's right. No, next Saturday. It can never be that because it's at Wembley and it's a full house, and it sets the tone for the start of the season. Don't get me wrong, just because whether you win that game or lose it, it's not going to set the tone for your season necessarily. But why not? If you're at Wembley in front of a full house, why not give it everything? And I think both teams will, and it'll be good to see some Premier League action for the first time in a couple of months.
Aidan McGee, thanks for your input and commiserations on the 4-0 thumping. Hopefully it won't set the precedent for
It's a long season, don't worry.
Yeah, thank you.
OK, then do stick with us, because we're going to have a quick flick through the Sunday papers.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant the Big
Green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Morning again. Welcome back. It's 7:39. You're listening and watching Breakfast here on GB News with me and him.
Yeah, and it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is editor of Spikes, Tom Slater, and author and broadcaster, good pal of mine, Nikki Hodgson. Good morning to you both. Again, superb round one. Let's go for round two. Tom, kick off with you. Sunday Express, page 12. Shock horror. Interest rates will help to kill the high street.
I mean, the high street, of course, has already been hammered by so much in recent years, even before the pandemic, so many hospitality venues shutting down and so on. And this rate rise from the Bank of England up to 5.25% is only hammering them further. One of the big problems that a lot of them are experiencing as well is that they took on a lot of debt during the pandemic as well, just to be able to stay above water. There's £10 billion worth of COVID loans wrapped up in hospitality venues themselves. And the consequence of all this is there's a terrifying statistic here. Since 2020, 13% of the hospitality industry has effectively shut down in this country. And a lot of these businesses, if a pub closes, it most likely will just be turned into flats. A lot of the time, you're talking about high streets being lost forever, really, and all in response to the terrible economic circumstances, which a lot of these businesses, it's something that was entirely out of their control. This isn't about them not running themselves properly. This is about external shocks as well as policies taken by the government that they needn't have taken, which have really hammered these places. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, certainly hospitality, Nikki, from the very start has been sort of hammered by COVID and all sorts of things. What could we do about this, though? I mean, we hear from people like Adam Brooks, GB News contributor, landlord, VAT breaks for pubs, you know, maybe like a scaling back of business rates, because let's face it, not only is it pubs, but also the high street retailers, they can't compete with the online biggies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my husband was a hospitality business owner until recently. He got very lucky and sold his bars after the pandemic because they had basically clung on. But I think, you know, for a very long time, it has been that the issue with the landlords just putting up the rates all the time. Certainly during COVID, we dealt with that a lot. It was just that they just refused to budge on the rent, and then they were going to lose the premises. And it's like, but this is a really profitable business that will obviously come back when this is over. So they were kind of really kind of like short-sighted in their want to profiteer, basically. So, but I think business rates is a really good one. There's so many issues with staffing. Staffing is the biggest issue now, recruiting and retaining staff, being able to pay a decent wage because you're not having all these like knock-on. I mean, the thing we've got to remember is that hospitality is, what, the 5th biggest employer, technically, in Britain. We're not talking about a tiny industry or a cottage industry. We're talking about something that has lots of people that it sustains, and we have to invest more in sustaining those people because there's so many of them.
100%.
Got to invest more in lots of things. The question is,
Absolutely.
where is the money coming from at the moment?
Yeah.
And money is a big problem with the story you picked out from The Observer, where patients who are up against long NHS waiting lists, desperate for some sort of treatment, maybe a scan or something like that, are finding a new way to actually buy in.
Yeah, so patients are now using buy now, pay later schemes offered by apps like Klarna, for example. That's just one of them. There's many different services to pay for private scans, private tests, things that can be not necessarily diagnostic, but things that you initially need doing to, you know, knock something off the list. Or
Before
at
you
least
can go towards treatment, you have to do this.
Exactly. Because, you know, it's like you go, you know, for example, I have a hernia right now, I'll tell you, because I've had a baby. And the waiting list to even be seen by a consultant to look at it is a year with the NHS.
Is it?
Yeah.
Gosh.
So I've gone private and just found out I don't need anything doing about it, so they're just going to leave it. But I had to pay privately for that because I was just like, I can't just sit here for a year and
so for that, for
find
instance,
out.
you'd need an ultrasound scan at the very least, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
I wonder how much that would cost.
Well, they're not
you were
cheap.
just going, no, they're not.
They're not
Anything
cheap.
to do with a laboratory or a scan or anything like that involves multiple staff for a start, doesn't it?
Well,
and then I would have thought that's very expensive to take out a buy now, pay later.
Well, exactly. This is what this is saying, that we're not looking at, you know, small fees like a private blood test, which wouldn't be a couple of £100. We're looking at things like, you know, medical scans and investigations that cost between 1 and 25,000, and people are taking up to that much money out to get it done. It just proves how desperate people are to be seen. Because obviously, you know, if you think you've got something really seriously wrong with you, time is of the essence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, what is 25 grand if it saves
your life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And Tom, you know, on the one hand, you know, the Observer are going to go for this brazen profiteering. It's the privates. It's sharks moving in. But Nikki absolutely nails it. If you think you have something that could be life-shortening or even worse, you would pay it. And isn't this just symptomatic of the fact that we've got this massive backlog because of COVID lockdowns, and this is where we're at, and it's kind of inevitable?
I think it is, and I think these are the problems that when you've got a dysfunctional health service, which, regardless of how you feel about the NHS, was dysfunctional, but even before the pandemic, it's been exacerbated by COVID, it's been exacerbated by the lockdowns. I mean, it's one of the lines, actually, the junior doctors trotted out during the strikes, which I thought was very good, is that we don't have a health service, we have a waiting list. And the whole system seems to be set up to basically stop you from seeing a doctor or clinician for as long as possible.
7 million now on waiting list.
It's huge, and this is unprecedented.
By the time you realise, and maybe your GP has told you, there is a need for you to go for a scan or something, because you may have something serious, that's too late to even try and take out a private health insurance deal, because that would then be a pre-existing condition they wouldn't cover you for.
No.
So, you know, you need money and you need it fast if you're going to do that. But buy now, pay later deals are always expensive, aren't they?
Well, the problem is, you know, they're interest-free if you keep up to the payments. The minute you don't, the interest rate is crazy, you know, anywhere between 27 and 34%.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, and that is the worrying aspect of this story. You know, people are going to fall into debt very quickly if they can't keep up to those payments.
And then there's an ethical conversation, of course, because if you are desperate by nature, and financially desperate, but if you're desperate for your life, then you would pay them.
Yes, that's the trouble.
And obviously, it's what happens in America. You know, everybody has medical debts. Like, so many people have medical bills. Outstanding.
OK, let's look at a lovely summer or autumn of Just Stop Oil protests.
Yes, so the proverbial that just won't flush are coming back again. So 3,000 Just Stop Oil supporters are planning action over the course of October, in which they're going to try and once again kind of shut London down. One of these renewed campaigns of slow marches, as they call them, trying to block roads, bring traffic to a standstill. There's even a nice detail in here about to prepare for the assault on the capital. Just Stop Oil are hosting a mass youth training session in September where there's going to be free vegan food and a quote-unquote legendary rave. As Nikki was saying earlier, if you have to call it legendary, it probably isn't going to be legendary. To say that the public's patience with these people has run out is a harsh understatement. I think sometimes we talk too much about their tactics because protest is supposed to be disruptive. More people would be behind them if they believed in the cause that they were campaigning for. But the cause they're campaigning for is to make people worse off and colder with lower horizons at a time when they're already being pummeled by a cost of living crisis. So I dare say we're going to see more dissatisfaction with them on the roads and on the streets when they roll out.
And I wonder, Nikki, or indeed Anne, would the idea of a Just Stop Oil vegan rave come to you?
Oh, yes, it sounds glorious, doesn't it? Honestly, I'd walk there.
I mean, the idea of veganism only applies to, like, certain things ingested, should I say. Certain vegans can be very selective about when they're vegan and they're raving.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just leave it there.
Or indeed when they use oil.
Oh, honestly, that's not, the idea of them paralysing London that's just terrible, isn't it? And that's what's going to happen, because they're clearly going to go ahead, even though they must sense that they're becoming rather unpopular. We're going to have to leave it there, because we want to talk a lot about the question mark in the universe. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't seen it.
Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, God, stick around.
Beautiful.
It's from the James Webb telescope. We showed it you earlier in the week. It's from the James Webb telescope, that super-duper telescope up in orbit.
Look at that.
And it's been looking out into deep space. And it's been looking at... Well, it came up with this picture. And you see there in the Daily Mail that they've highlighted one little area, which isn't like any other sort of star or whatever. It's in the exact shape of a question mark. And, of course, that begs the question, is there anybody out there? What question is it asking us? Apparently, according to the experts, it could be two merging galaxies, with one being sort of stretched out by the gravity of the other. But it doesn't explain why it looks like a question mark to us.
It could just be some random stars in a certain shape.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, let's not spoil the allure of the story. Joining us now is space and planetary scientist Andy Lound. Good morning to you, Andy. So, the question is, what does the question mark signify?
What is it?
Yeah, good morning, both. Yes, it's exciting, isn't it, really? The interesting thing about this is, of course, it's not what the Webb telescope was looking for. It was actually looking at a pair of stars in their early formation, and just to the bottom right of it, you suddenly saw this question mark shape, which is a line of sight effect. I mean, if you look at the image carefully and then look at images right and left of it, you see on the left of it, you have these wonderful spiral galaxies, which are closer to us. To the right of it, you have a little amber-coloured little fuzzy bit. That's actually the sort of shape you're looking at the top part of the question mark. And it's actually angled onto us slightly. And then the bottom, the full stop of it, of the question mark, is another galaxy which is interacting with this main galaxy, and it's dragging off part of the spiral arms of it. So what you're seeing is, as opposed to the galaxy you can see on the left, we're seeing it face on, what we're looking at is a galaxy tilted to us with its spiral arm being pulled away. And of course, it gives us the line of sight effect of a question mark. And of course, it's unlikely the question mark did exist at all in the universe at the stage this was it. I mean, that's going to be hundreds of millions of light years away. So it's an awful long distance from us. But it's one of these great things that the humans can do is to look at shapes and objects and associate them with ourselves. But it's an interesting thing, because it does pose the question, the universe is a question mark, isn't it? What is out there, who is out there, and why it is out there? I mean, if you believe your Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, then they would say it was put on there on purpose.
Absolutely. And if there were anywhere any little green men or other intelligent species on a planet somewhere very, very far-flung, a different aspect of the universe, they would be looking at the same thing and not seeing the question mark that we're seeing. Can I ask you about sorry, am I right there? It would not look like a question mark.
Yes, absolutely right. Perfect description.
Can I ask about the James Webb telescope? Because us ordinary mortals looked at the pictures delivered from Hubble, and they were brilliant enough. And I look at some of these pictures from James Webb, and I don't see the difference. But to you, a space scientist, I mean, is the James Webb telescope providing better information, more remarkable pictures to you?
Yes, they are, because they're looking in a different wavelength. This is really important. They're looking at a different wavelength. They're looking at the near infrared, something Hubble couldn't do. Hubble looked in other wavelengths, in the infrared, but not the same level. And it was looking in white light images. These are near infrared images, which are then processed. So you're getting out more details from objects which are more distant. So you're seeing objects which are further away. You're also getting more details out of objects which are actually closer to us. One of the images they released this week is probably one of the greatest images ever released, was of a planetary nebula called M57, where a star exploded. And we're able, for instance, to see molecular hydrogen bubbles coming away from that, which the Hubble couldn't really see in the detail that the Webb can actually do. So yes, it is. Through people just looking at it thinking, well, isn't it the same sort of images? And you go, well, no, the devil's in the detail. You enlarge these images, and they're much bigger images than the Hubble is doing as well. You can actually see far more structural detail. And also the instruments on board are measuring to a finer degree that the Hubble could actually do. So yes, these are far, far better things. And of course, bear in mind, we've looked at the double star formation here before, and that question mark image would have been there at the bottom corner, but we haven't seen it before. Why? And that's simply because the Webb telescope is so much better.
Well, Andy, of course, the big question mark is there anybody out there? You know, we saw earlier this week meteorites with alloys on them, which people are claiming have to be from outside of the normal creation system. Is Earth, do you think, spectacularly unique? Or in all the billions and billions of other systems out there, could there be life out there?
I think from the mathematical point of view, there's got to be extraterrestrial civilizations out there, intelligent ones. I mean, you just look at that one image alone, and most of those images, the ones without the spikes, are actually galaxies of billions of stars in each. And there are billions upon billions of galaxies. And it's just incomprehensible to think that intelligent life hasn't arisen on any of these through the huge history of the universe itself. The difficulty is actually finding them and communicating with them. That's the hardest part. You're looking for a specific grain of sand on all the beaches and all the world, and that's actually quite a difficult thing to do. In fact, it's actually harder in the case of finding extraterrestrial life. I think from a common sense point of view, a mathematical point of view, there's got to be extraterrestrials out there, possibly very different to ourselves, probably looking in our direction. But whether or not we find them becomes very difficult. And I have a suspicion we actually haven't come across them as yet. But they've got to be out there. Just think what a wonderful thing that would be if we were able to find another species out there, an intelligent species. So think of the exchange. People talk about diversity down here. Think of that for diversity, what we could exchange.
I don't know where the conversation would even start. And it's always good to talk to you. Thank you so much. And wonderful to see that photograph. Thank you very much, NASA, for that amazing photograph from James Webb. Brilliant.
I find that sort of so fascinating. You know, maybe that question mark is a sign. Maybe they're saying, we're out here, come and talk to us.
It's a coincidence, but there you go. Oh, yeah. But, I mean, I agree totally with Andy that mathematically there has to be other life. But it would coincidentally exist at the same time as us at a point where we could communicate. I mean, how would that happen? It'd have to be an enormous coincidence. However, it keeps you talking, doesn't it? It's lovely to be with you this morning. Do stick with us. Plenty more to talk about.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Well, today will be more of a day of sunshine and showers with lighter winds around than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday's storm Anthony is already moving away to the southeast but could still bring some cloud and blustery conditions to parts of East Anglia through this morning. Elsewhere, we'll see cloud and showers soon bubbling up, and these could be heavy in a few places across Scotland, Northern England, and with a chance of the odd thunderstorm across Northern Ireland. We're feeling much more pleasant today as well compared to yesterday, with those temperatures just creeping into the low 20s in the south. Now, as we go through the rest of this afternoon and into the evening, we'll see those showers starting to ease, becoming more confined to northern areas and plenty of clear spells around. Now, with clear spells and lighter winds, we'll see those temperatures dropping just a little bit more readily tonight. So towns and cities generally clinging on to those double figures, but more widely seeing temperatures into the mid-single figures in rural areas. This will mean it'll be a bright but chilly start to the new week. Plenty of sunshine around. There could still be the odd shower developing, heaviest across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. But with those light winds and that sunshine around, feeling even more pleasant as we go into the new week, with those temperatures just starting to climb a little bit more into the 20s, with a high of 23 in the southeast.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 6th of August. Today, sabotage. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has accused Keir Starmer of sabotaging her efforts to end the migrant channel crossings using what she calls a web of cronies.
Harry and Meghan have snapped up the rights to turn a best-selling book into a movie after they were ditched by Spotify for reportedly failing to meet productivity requirements.
And angry Greek locals have launched what they're calling the towel movement on British tourist hotspots. They say their beautiful beaches have been taken over by sunbed hoggers. And now other tourists and even the locals have got nowhere to go and sunbathe. We'd like to know, have you ever been a sunbed hogger?
And I certainly have. But anyway, how will the weather look like for today? Got to be better than yesterday. Here's Rachel Ayres from the Met Office with an update.
It was an unsettled start to the weekend with Storm Anthony crossing the UK, but it looks like a drier and brighter second half for us across the UK. Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
Yeah, we want to know when the weather is going to get better. Good morning to you. It's lovely to be with you this Sunday morning. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Steve says, morning, Steve, sunbed hogging doesn't always end well. I remember as a child seeing folk claiming the sunbeds from the restaurant at breakfast. My dad then went down after breakfast and threw 4 beds and the belongings into the pool and then got them out for our use.
That's a classic dad moment on holiday.
It is, isn't it? It's one of those things where you've had enough.
Yeah, dad rage, sunbed rage. For those who haven't been watching earlier, I am a sunbed hogger. I send my children down. I'm like the Artful Dodger. Get down there before your breakfast. That one, there. Do that, and then I sort of do secure them all day. I've even been known to bribe the poolside fella with the odd cerveza or two to make sure I keep it all day. Yeah, so you can't
even get around it that way, because I thought if more hotels should employ their pool guy to actually say, no, 2 hours, maximum 3 hours hogging a sunbed or something like that. After that, your belongings will be moved. But you say that you can bribe some of these guys.
Well, on the local wages, those guys are, let's just say they're definitely open to a bit of persuasion.
I liked the idea we heard earlier from somebody who goes to Sandals Resort, where you can, I imagine you have to pay a bit extra, have a butler. It's like a concierge sort of floor or in the hotel or something, and you can pay the butler to go out and reserve sunbeds for you.
But you see, they're getting other people to do their dirty work for them, man, and they're making out that that's posh. Send the kids. They're on the payroll too. And people agree with me on this. And Martin Lee says here, I support Martin. Martin's absolutely right. If you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah. Diane in Nottingham says, on cruises, I've seen people get up at silly o'clock to bag one in the sun and one in the shade. And that's greedy.
That is what you call multitasking, thinking ahead to the arc of the sun. See, that, even for me, that's next-level hogging.
But this is a good one. An anonymous viewer, and you'll see in a moment why they remain anonymous. We were in Spain some time ago, and the sunbed huggers were out every day. We managed to clear one half of the pool area with a sprinkle of itching powder.
What?
I understand an investigation was launched, but the culprits were never found.
Is that something like the Beano or the Dandy?
Yeah, but it sounded it worked. Gosh.
Great stuff.
Anyway, we're going to be talking about this in a few minutes' time, because some resorts are trying to do something about it. Some locals, particularly in the Greek islands, are getting together to try and do something about it, because they're finding that even they, as locals living near the beach, can't get onto the beach certainly can't get a sunbed on their own beach, if you like, because people like you are taking over.
To be fair, there's now an organised racket going on. So what it is, local companies are getting in. It's a bit like buying up all the tickets for a gig. They're buying up all the sunbeds and then selling them on at a markup. See, for me, Anne, that the locals and the tourists are getting stung by that one.
The locals and the Tories?
The locals and the tourists.
Oh, I thought you said tourists.
And the tourists.
Now politics comes into sunbeds.
If you're a Tory tourist, then you're getting done over too.
It reminds me a bit as well of those lovely British seaside resorts with their lines of beautiful...
the deck chairs.
No, that too. But I'm thinking of the beach huts.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get a beach hut for love nor money.
They go for a fortune.
Anymore. Well, they sell for a fortune and they rent for a fortune. So, I mean, it's absolutely impossible to get your hands on one, which was such a shame, because that was really civilised, having a little beach hut. If you live in one of those areas where beach huts are just impossible to get hold of, you'll feel it too. So let's go on to politics now, shall we?
Yeah, that's it.
And the Home Secretary has accused Keir Starmer of trying to sabotage her attempts to end the illegal immigration crisis.
Yeah, Suella Braverman claims the Labour leader has a web of cronies who are blocking any effort to stop small boat crossings from Calais.
Well, we certainly know it's a problem for her at the moment. Anything she comes up with seems to be stymied by somebody. Right. Our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, is in Bournemouth this morning. Hello there, Olivia. I mean, yes, has Suella Braverman got a point?
Well, yes, I think she has put Keir Starmer on the back foot a little bit. Her argument is that one of the lawyers involved in helping write Labour's 2024-2025 election manifesto, a woman called Jacqueline McKenzie, has been heavily involved in anti-Rwanda schemes. So there are some pressure groups, lots of lawyers, human rights lawyers, who are working together to try and put as many blocks as they can on Suella Braverman's scheme to get migrants deported from Britain to Rwanda when they they come here illegally, get their claims processed in Rwanda rather than here. So it's not really a question of Keir Starmer himself being particularly adverse to the scheme, although Labour has voted against it before. It's more that once again, and you'll remember when Keir Starmer was accused of being in bed with Just Stop Oil, the people who Keir Starmer is associating with seem to rather like the cause of illegal migrants to the UK. That said, Keir Starmer has hit back, saying that Suella Braverman is only saying this because she herself is on the back foot. Keir Starmer is saying that the Tories have actually failed to deport illegal migrants quickly enough, which is very interesting in itself because it shows yet again that perhaps on this issue there isn't that much clear blue water between the Tories and Labour. Keir Starmer's argument isn't that Suella Braverman's really doing anything wrong, it's just that she's not carrying out her own policies quickly enough. And he's saying that Labour, in her shoes, will be doing things better and more efficiently. So it'll be really interesting to see where this argument progresses, because yes, illegal migration is a political hot potato at the moment, but both sides are actually pretty close to each other.
Yeah, and Olivia, this is the front page of the Sunday Express today. That's where this exclusive has come from. And there's an extraordinary personal attack in this article where Braverman has said of Keir Starmer that he has successfully campaigned to halt this government's attempts to deport vile foreign criminals, including rapists and murderers, which is a total betrayal of their victims. She's, of course, referring to a flight in December 2020 that was grounded with 23 criminals on board to Jamaica, one of whom went on to murder. Is this a taste of what you think we can expect to come? We saw a couple of weeks ago, look for these wedge issues. This is quite dirty politics. Do you think the British public would like this?
I think it absolutely is dirty politics. We are already seeing the gloves coming off before the general election. And anyone who follows politics closely will know that that always happens. But usually it's a little bit closer to a general election. We're something like a year out at the moment. I think that, yes, as you say, this is one of those wedge issues. The Tories want to show that they are the party that cares about illegal immigration. And as sort of aggressive as Suella Braverman can be, the better as far as she's concerned. Because poll after poll and focus group after focus group show that the British public are very keen on getting a handle on illegal immigration. And if the Tories can sort of own that issue, as it were, that'll be really good for their electoral prospects.
Well, that's the point, I suppose. If you're a voter, and especially if you're a floating voter, and this issue is important to you, you're going to be having to decide which party you trust to actually get anything done. And while Keir Starmer is saying he'll be more effective, he too has to admit that he'll come up against the same band of human rights lawyers who will oppose his every move too.
Well, exactly, and that's the argument that Suella Braverman is making. Essentially, what Keir Starmer is saying is, well, the Tories have been in power for 13 years. You might like what they say on illegal immigration, but have they actually done anything effective? Surely you're better off with me. I'm untested. At least I might get it to work. Whereas Suella Braverman is saying, OK, Keir Starmer talks the talk. He says he's going to do things more effectively. But look at the people who he's hanging around with. Look at Jacqueline McKenzie, a perfect example of one of those human rights lawyers who is very keen to block the Rwanda scheme. And it's not the first time she's criticised Keir Starmer for being too soft on illegal migrants. There was a time a few months ago when Labour was proposing a policy to make it easier for migrants to work in the UK before they've got licence to remain here. And Suella Braverman accused Keir Starmer of incentivising illegal migrants to come over here. So yes, it's certainly a real wedge issue and something that Suella Braverman is going to go very, very hard on all the way from now until the general election next year.
Yeah.
Yep, no.
Olivia, it makes you wonder if attacking your opponent is going to deliver on this issue, because the facts are the facts. And if we judge the Conservatives on their ability to take back control of our borders and stop the boats, they've measurably failed. July was the biggest month on record. 3,300 people made the journey in 63 boats, an average of 52 migrants per vessel. Is attacking Starmer going to be enough? Or are they both basically just as bad as each other?
Well, yeah, it doesn't feel as though attacking Starmer is going to be enough for the Conservatives at the moment. as we know, although the polls do show that the British public are very keen on getting illegal immigration under control, by far a minority thinks that Rishi Sunak is handling the situation effectively. Now, one does feel a little bit sorry for Rishi Sunak. He has been working very hard on this. He's had his Rwanda plan on the table for a very long time. He's got a lot of hurdles to climb over until we actually see migrants deported to Rwanda. But yes, as you say, if you just look at the track record rather than the insults being flung around at the moment, it doesn't feel as though the Tories have a handle on this.
Camilla, sorry, not Camilla, it's Olivia. Thank you very much indeed. I said Camilla because I was just reminding everybody that you're in Bournemouth this morning for the Camilla Tominey show, aren't you, which comes up at 9:30. It's lovely to see you there. It's not quite as sunny as it should be, but it looks a bit promising. I used to work just up the road from where you are now on the Bournemouth Echo. Give Bournemouth my love. Thanks very much, Olivia.
That's super.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, it was a good place. It's funny, we're going to be talking about sunbeds in a couple of moments.
Yes, we are.
I worked on the Bournemouth Echo, and during the summer, I was a fairly junior reporter, and the news editor used to come up and say, go looking for a story. I want to, go along the beach. And he'd just send me to walk along the beach, because sooner or later you'd see a story.
What kind of stuff do you find?
Well, it would be a wonderful picture story, children building some wonderful, I don't know, donkey and ice creams. And sometimes, mind you, I think even in those days, you would have got pictures of sunbed hoggers.
Wow.
Yeah, and Bournemouth Beach can get very, very crowded.
The history of hogging.
But it was a lovely place to work, good old Bournemouth. And that's what we're going to talk about, sunbed hogging. We've been talking about it all morning, and controversial, isn't it? Because some people say they disapprove of sunbed hoggers, like Martin is, self-confessed, but they only do it because everybody else does it. And if you don't, then, you're left sitting on the sand.
If you snooze, you lose.
Well, there you go. Each year, the sunbed wars apparently break out at resorts all over the world, certainly through Europe, where the demand for loungers outstrips the supply.
Yeah, in a bid to stop nighttime guerrilla tactics. Some hotels remove any towels placed on deck chairs before a certain time, but that only encourages yet more tactics.
Indeed. Stay where you are. We're talking about that in a second, are we? We're talking about it now. No, we're talking about it now. We're going to talk to Mark Palmer, who's the travel editor for the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. And you know all about this, don't you? Very good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, I went out on Wednesday afternoon to this hotel near Torremolinos just to find out what was going on, because, as you have said, there have been some alarming reports from the front line. And it was a very interesting experience, and it was not as gruesome as I had expected in that particular hotel.
Because they had some sort of a scheme in place.
Yes. So it was a four-star hotel. It's been in most of the papers. There had been pictures of people queuing for a couple of hours in the morning. Now, the thing about in Spain, there is a law by which if you have a swimming pool, or in this case, swimming pools, plural, they have to be fenced off overnight and whenever there isn't a lifeguard on duty. So that means there is a certain point of time in the day, in the morning, when the gates open. And so inevitably, that means there's going to be a bit of a crush. Now, this hotel, their gates were opening at 10 o'clock up until August the 1st, not quite sure why. And then on August the 1st, they decreed that, in fact, they'd start opening the gates at 9 o'clock. And so the queue did start to build up, about an hour and a half before that. But in some ways, you can understand that, in that if this is your precious week's holiday in the sun with your family, maybe you've got young children, you want a spot in the shade, you want a spot, near the pool.
Oh, Mark, we've lost you. In fact, we're looking at video at the moment, and if you're listening on the radio, I'm sure you've seen this video. It's sort of gone viral, as they say, of people absolutely running once they're let inside the fences Mark was talking about. Absolutely running for a decent spot, and then they're going to hog it. Have we got Mark back? No, we're still trying to
If you're of a certain age, as I am, that looks like the Harrods sale
Yes,
remember that on Boxing
exactly.
Day? Or
looks exactly like that.
People steam through the doors, look at them, they're
and knock everybody
rampaging,
else over, and they're going for a best spot.
throwing towels like a dam busters bomb.
I think we've got your back, Mark, haven't we?
I'm so sorry. I was just checking on my sunbed at that very moment.
Yeah, somebody came in and was going to get yours off you. But, I mean, that's the point, is we've been talking through the morning of various hotels and resorts and people trying to stop the sunbed hoggers. But it appears that, you know, people will do anything and they'll find ways round the rules if rules are set.
Yes, absolutely. And I think for some of these resorts, the one I was in particular, part of the problem was that they had no beach aspect. So everybody was crowded into the area around the swimming pools. And so it's one thing to bag a sunbed early in the morning. The problem comes when then people try to hog it for the entire day. So they might go shopping, they might go into town for lunch, and they still got their books and their bags or whatever on the bed. Now, that does seem out of order. So this particular hotel, they've started this new, it's called the 45-minute rule, where if you're away from your sunbed for more than 45 minutes, then they remove your towel and give the sunbed to somebody else.
But apparently you can bribe those people too to actually see things from your point of view.
Yeah.
I'm sure that on some of the beaches, I'm sure the locals, and I suppose it's market forces, there's suddenly a new market has opened up that you can hire somebody and say, look, I'll give you £5 if you just sort of hang around for me. So yeah, it's as you were saying, and it's an annual story. It's just that this year it seems, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because we're so desperate to see some sunshine and get it right. But it does seem to have escalated this year.
Who's got the worst reputation, Mark?
The Germans.
Is that true? Is it Germans?
That's a terrible stereotype. I can't believe that's been said. But the thing about us is that we're very civilized. The queue was amazing. One lady said to me, "Just give us a queue and we'll join it." I mean, it's part of our sort of psyche. And everybody was kind of quite jovial. There was a lot of chat going on. And there was a few French people. They got a little bit stroppy, to be fair. And actually, there were very few Germans at this particular resort. But obviously, we like to maintain that the Germans, they are very greedy when it comes to sunbeds, and I think we should maintain that tradition of blaming the Germans on this escalating crisis.
Yes.
Mark, tell us about another story you have on the Mail Online here. This extraordinary story of the towel movement. This is actually, it sounds like an organised racket of businessmen buying up the sun loungers in advance, selling them at a markup, and that's offending both the locals in Greece and the British tourists. So this has now gone into a full-scale escalation of a price warfare.
Well, absolutely. But I suppose you could say that perhaps even in the sort of Thatcherite era, that this is taking advantage of there's a gap in the market, and people are trying to plug it. But yeah, clearly the police will get involved, I suppose, at some stage if that's happening, if they're just sort of going along and hiring people and taking towels and, as you're saying, buying up the sunbeds. I mean, I did think actually that myself that, you know, you could just go and buy 10 sunbeds and shove it on the beach in a beautiful spot and charge people. I mean, in some ways, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, so this is an idea. And before we say goodbye to you, the Prime Minister of Rhodes seems to be offering people who were evacuated because of the fires recently, he seems to be offering them a free week's holiday in Rhodes next year.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I saw that, and that was very gratifying. Then when one actually digs a little bit deeper, it doesn't seem to be very clear how that's exactly going to work. And if you talk to some of the tour operators, Jet2 or TUI, they find that a very interesting pronouncement, but also unclear how that's actually going to happen.
Yeah,
we'll have to hold him to his word, won't we?
Yeah, he's saying it's either a week in the spring or in the fall, so not in the peak season. But now that's an extraordinary offer, an extraordinary piece of generosity if it comes through.
Yeah.
It's great generosity, but it's terrific pragmatism as well.
Yes.
Because
well,
Rhodes
absolutely.
desperately depends.
Yes, I mean, what's happened must be such a blow for them, because the travel industry is their major earner, isn't it? And people will fear going back in case there are similar fires. So he's just trying to say, we're still open for business. Yeah. Come and see us.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that they will all fear going back. I think a lot of people actually feel they want to really give something back to the island where they've had such a wonderful time, and there'll be a sense of loyalty about the place, I think.
Yeah. Great to talk to you. I'm glad we stuck with you and we managed to keep you on air. Thank you very much indeed, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a serious business, isn't it, Sunbed?
Well, I know, it sounds trivial, except that it's not.
No.
It's causing problems. It's spoiling some people's holidays. I think it's almost breaking out in war around the pool. And lots of people are getting in touch saying all hotels and resorts have to do is have as many sunbeds as they do guests. But that wouldn't work. I don't think you couldn't have enough room around the pool for that many sunbeds, but they wouldn't be in the right place either.
No, I've got to say...
I mean, you want to bag a really good place.
Yeah, I think Mark was being naive as well when he said just go and buy 10 sunbeds and slap them down, because then it would all kick off.
Yes, it really would.
It really would all kick off then, because this is a tightly controlled business.
And a hotel I was recently in Malta, there were some very prime places that had the sun nearly all day, but there were other places where you would just lose the sun, and that's where they stayed empty, and there was no room to move them into the sunny areas.
And Anne, you've precisely identified why people go and bag sunbeds early, because they're primo spots.
Yeah.
And you've got to, if you snooze, you lose. Up with the larks, send down the kids. That's why I do it.
I still think it's selfish to hold on to them all day,
well,
unless you're going to lie on them all day. But, you know, to keep your stuff on them when you go off for a siesta or for a little shopping trip or just for lunch, I'm not sure that's right. Anyway, keep in touch with us and tell us what you think. Do confess if you are a sunbed hogger. We'd love to hear from you. That's gbviews@gbnews.com.
Got it.
Should we find out about our weather?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Well, today will be more of a day of sunshine and showers with lighter winds around than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday's storm Anthony is already moving away to the southeast, but could still bring some cloud and blustery conditions to parts of East Anglia through this morning. Elsewhere, we'll see cloud and showers soon bubbling up, and these could be heavy in a few places across Scotland, Northern England, and with a chance of the odd thunderstorm across Northern Ireland. We're feeling much more pleasant today as well compared to yesterday, with those temperatures just creeping into the low 20s in the south. Now, as we go through the rest of this afternoon and into the evening, we'll see those showers starting to ease, becoming more confined to northern areas and plenty of clear spells around. Now, with clear spells and lighter winds, we'll see those temperatures dropping just a little bit more readily tonight. So towns and cities generally clinging on to those double figures, but more widely seeing temperatures into the mid-single figures in rural areas. This will mean it'll be a bright but chilly start to the new week. Plenty of sunshine around. There could still be the odd shower developing, heaviest across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. But with those light winds and that sunshine around, feeling even more pleasant as we go into the new week, with those temperatures just starting to climb a little bit more into the 20s, with a high of 23 in the southeast.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
And let's hope the weather just gets better and better. If you look at the front page of The Star today, you will see that people have spotted a strange orange disc in the sky, and we're going to see more of it in the next few days. It is, of course, the sun, but you could be forgiven for forgetting what it looks like.
Indeed.
It's been an extraordinary summer, hasn't it?
Where have you been?
Thus far. OK, well, look, I tell you what, stay where you are, because we've got all the showbiz news coming up with Stephanie Tetchy.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Da-da-da-da-dum, etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, the Big Green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Morning again, it's 8:28. You're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News with Anne and Martin. And Alison and Phil are watching us from the east coast of Australia, where they live. Nice. They say, we're just cooking a roast pork dinner and it's just gone 5 p.m. We watch the show most days and absolutely love it. Lovely to be with you.
Roast pork in Australia, that sounds absolutely divine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stephanie Tetchy has joined us now, catching up on, what we're all talking about in the world of showbiz and gossip, and Strictly Come Dancing has announced a couple more.
Yes, there are more names that have been added to the list. So yesterday we were talking about Angela Rippon, Amanda Abbington and Leighton Williams, who are the first 3 contestants who've been announced. Now we're going to have a newsreader, Christian Guru Murthy, who's been announced. He says he's very excited to be joining the lineup. He says that he's feeling quite like he's getting older and he feels like you only live once, so he's very happy to join the Strictly lineup. So it'll be quite interesting how Angela does and how Christian does, because you've got 2 newsreaders. Well,
I see what they've done there.
So,
although we know that Angela's a brilliant dancer.
Yes.
I don't know about Krishna and whether he looks like a mover and a shaker.
No, he says he's not a great dancer. But again, that's the fun of Strictly, seeing how people do on the dance floor, how they learn things. And sometimes you do get that wild card sometimes in Strictly of someone who's going to win. Like I remember a few years ago, Bill Bailey won, and people thought, he wouldn't last that well, and he done an amazing job with O.T. Mabuse. So So let's see how that goes. And a name that potentially is going to be announced today is Daniel Sturridge, former Liverpool player. Every time he used to score, he used to do the snake dance, and I think that's caught the eyes of Strictly bosses. So, you know, as I said yesterday, there is a formula to Strictly. They always tick the boxes. They'll get the news person, they'll get the sports person. So hopefully it'll be Daniel Sturridge, I feel.
I like watching sports stars do Strictly, especially blokes, because they're really out their comfort zone, and they have to unlearn how to be, you know, stiff and brusque and all the rest of it. So to be fluid,
but they're very competitive.
They are indeed, And interestingly, about Christian Gurumurthy, very outspoken on his opinions on Brexit.
He is.
So I wonder if that may affect the public vote.
Any reflection on his dancing?
It might on the voting.
Yeah, because he was taken off air.
He was.
From Channel 4, I think it was last year, so he is a bit of a controversial
figure. Good one.
So,
well, maybe he'll warm the hearts of everybody watching. There's this fascinating story I find with BritBox, which is a streaming channel now, which specialises in British stuff. The way they are now going to market some of the programmes that they're going to show.
Sometimes, Anna, I have to ask, have we just become too sensitive as a society? And is that why streaming services like BritBox are now putting warnings on everything? So most of our viewers might have watched Wolf Hall, which was based on Henry VIII's relationship with his wife, Anne Boleyn. We all know what happened to her. She got executed in
Wolf Hall, I mean, hugely successful.
But now BritBox have put a warning on all the series saying that it contains scenes of violence. You know, and that's not the only period drama that's getting a warning.
I mean, actually, scenes of violence. I mean, yes, you do see the beheading scene, but you don't see the violence of it.
No, you don't.
Implied violence in the drama.
It's just treating everybody like a child, isn't it?
It is.
If one of the most famous kings in the history of humanity, who had a penchant for giving his wives literally the chop, if you need to be told that, it's like, my
if you need to be warned about it. What else are they warning?
Well, now they're also looking at the series of Poirot, and they're saying that they've got 27 episodes of that, and they're saying it contains, again, scenes of violence, warning references to suicide and nudity as well. And it's quite bad.
But he was a detective who investigates murders in every episode.
What you expect. And, you know, the time when all these films and these series were coming out, there wasn't an issue. So why do they do warnings on it? It's because they say they're reflecting society at the moment. So, as I said, it asks the big question. Maybe viewers have become too sensitive, which, personally, I don't think they have.
Are they going to be showing Downton Abbey?
They've put a warning on that as well for scenes. There's a housemaid in there who gets raped in one of the scenes. So, again, they've flagged a warning on that as well.
What do you think? Is that too much?
Well, because I think what happens, BritBox is jointly run by the BBC and the ITV, and you do sometimes get, when they do put shows out, lots of complaints come through. So I think what these broadcasters are doing, they're trying to protect their back to say, actually, we've warned you guys from the beginning of these shows that it may contain things. So something you might have watched in the 80s, 90s, audiences might not have had a problem. Now, in this day and age where everyone's a bit woke, a bit sensitive, I
can see why, because they do specialise in some of these very old British programmes. I mean, if you were showing something like On the Buses at the moment, you might think a warning is OK there, because they use language on those sort of old sitcoms that wouldn't be acceptable nowadays, and that might be a bit hurtful.
I'm not so bothered by the warnings. I just don't like when they cut scenes out, because that's just destroying people's art and how TV productions have normally been OK. That's my problem with it. I think a warning is OK if people are sensitive of nature.
I think it might be a good idea to say that this drama in this episode does contain a scene about rape, because I mean, if you have been a victim of something and you think you're just watching this rather cosy historical movie, and then suddenly something comes up that is going to seriously affect the way you think.
I think it's kind of case-specific. I agree. You know, if you've been through a trauma yourself, you may well be, upset by something like that. But not many people who watch Anne Boleyn have had their head chopped off.
No,
or if they have, they're dead.
Yeah, and it begs the question, how far do we take it? Because I get scared with stuff like this. Then eventually they'll say in classrooms, we can't teach kids about Anne Boleyn because they might get triggered by it. You know, once you give an inch to these things, then, it leaves room for a mile to be taken off stuff, so...
Yeah, and they're saying Jack the Ripper was violent.
Yes.
And the clue's in the name.
Yes, it sort of is, yeah. Very quickly, about Jennifer Aniston.
Jennifer Aniston, Jamie Foxx put a post up on Instagram, the American actor, where he said, you know, they killed Jesus, what do you think they'll do to me? A Jewish news site took offence with that because they're saying that for a very long time Jewish people have been made to look like, you know, the killers of Jesus and stuff. And the site also said that Jennifer Aniston liked that post, and now she's come out and she said, I did not like that post. I do not endorse hate. And we know how social media is. It's like the wild, wild west when it comes to these things. Jamie Foxx has apologised for it because he said that was not his intention. He was rather talking about a backstabbing friend. So for Jennifer to get involved with that, it just didn't make sense.
Well, that's the trouble with social media. It's not just what you say, it's what you might have liked at some stage.
That's right, and that's the problem. And how it's interpreted as well.
Exactly.
So it is the wild, wild west.
OK, well, Stephanie, thanks very much indeed. So those are the sort of showbiz headlines. In a couple of moments, I think we are going to be talking about what's in the Sunday papers.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello again, it's 8:39. You're watching Breakfast here on GB News with me and Im. And talking about Im, I've just got to do this one before we go. Oh, where is it? No, I can't find it now. Oh, yeah, no. Neil says, sorry, Martin, but if you're travelling anywhere abroad and you're only spending time on a sunbed, you're a bit sad.
I don't only spend time in the sunbed, but it's an important sort of tranche of my leisure time.
It's a tranche.
And I want to make sure I get the primo spot. I think I speak for the nation.
So if you haven't been watching earlier, he sends his kids downstairs to the pool and they bag the best sunbeds.
Yeah, they've got to pay their way, Anne.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. I'm glad I'm not going on holiday. You have to tell me where you're going, because really, I don't approve. Anyway, we're going to look through the Sunday papers this morning with the editor of Spike, Tom Slater, and author and broadcaster Nikki Hodgson. Thanks very much for coming back to us. Now, what's our first story? I've got it here.
Yeah, Tom, it's a brilliant one from the Sunday Express, and it's a poll which basically shows that the support for banning new petrol and diesel cars has plummeted.
It has. So there is this goal that the government has set to ban all petrol and diesel cars new sales by 2030. Even just a few years ago, it had pretty solid plurality support. I should say 44% backed it. Now that's down to 35%, with 31% supporting. So it's the first time that we've seen actually public backlash to this particular policy. And this is the story across all of the kind of net zero green policies that you see, which is that when people ask, in theory, do you think it's a good idea if we have lower emissions, if more people cycle, etc., if we should pursue net zero. But as soon as it's made clear that this will come at a financial and personal cost to people, they are understandably against it. And we're seeing that pattern repeat itself here. And I think that's entirely understandable. People might paint this as people being selfish or whatever. The entire social contract in this country is you elect people under the understanding that your life will get better as a consequence. The problem with a lot of these extreme green targets is they're saying, vote for us and we'll make your life harder. More expensive, lower horizons.
Yeah, they're not sort of selling it right, are they?
Not at all. And I think this is going to be another wake-up call for the government, which is they're trying to look both ways on the green agenda at the moment. They're trying to say we side with drivers, but at the same time we're still sticking to net zero. At some point they're going to have to pick a side, I think, because voters in particular are waking up to the fact that there's no free lunch where these targets are concerned.
It's a case of reality bites, isn't it, Nikki? Because the concept of cleaner air, the concept of saving the planet is great. The cost, when it's a personal cost, and it's made clear, 10 grand for a heat pump, 20 grand for a new car, and by the way, your old car has got to be thrown in a ditch. People will then start to query it, don't they?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, the policies that this government and previous governments have implemented have not served the interests of people around green energy. And so why should consumers be left to pay the price of those poor policies that were, they were not foresighted, they were not thinking about what was coming down the line in terms of how we were going to have to live. And the other thing, of course, is that, thinking globally about, which countries have the most emissions and factory emissions and kind of, that kind of stuff. People find it very difficult to take on board, well, I'm the problem with the environment. So, and again, and I've got to pay for it. It just doesn't sit well with people.
Yeah. Move us on to the Sun on Sunday story you've been looking at about social media platforms like TikTok and Facebook, which are joining forces with the police to crack down on people smugglers.
Yeah, this is quite an extraordinary bit of reporting, actually, from Sophia Slay, who I think comes on here, actually. Sort of saying that Rishi Sunak has decided that one of the problems around people smuggling is that there are ads. I didn't know this, but there are ads on TikTok, and Facebook, advertising services basically saying, if you pay this much, we'll give you a kind of fake passport and all the documents you need, and you can come into Britain or other countries. And so the government is going to try and crack down on these ads, working with these social media companies. The problem I have with this story is, if it's so easy, why don't we do that with lots of aspects of ads? Because we talk frequently on this programme about, knife crime and guns that are available for sale, all sorts of, like drugs, all sorts of nefarious things that children can get their hands on, and things being advertised to young people, for example. I don't understand why this is the thing they'll be able to make it work for, and they can't do for a number of other things. And obviously, social media platforms are notoriously difficult to bring to task.
They shouldn't be running these sort of adverts anyway.
Of course they shouldn't, Anne, of course they shouldn't. But the thing is, this could be a real problem for them, because if they can successfully do this, then there's going to be a load of other stuff that they're going to
there really is.
And don't you think, Tom, part of the problem here is that ministers, even prime ministers who claim to be tech-savvy, can't seem to grasp that you're chasing shadows continually. If you kick this off of Facebook, it will go onto TikTok. If you get it off TikTok, it will go onto Telegram. Can you actually stop this, or will the bad guys simply adapt?
I think that's always the story, is that they adapt to these things. I think you're exactly right about MPs and politicians not being nearly as tech-savvy. Whenever there's some kind of, like, hearing of one of the committees, the Science and Technology Committee or whatever, and they get one of these Silicon Valley people in front of them, it often ends up resembling a kind of tech support session. They have no idea how any of this stuff works, and that's not to let the companies off the hook. It's just to say that these issues are a lot more complicated. So you have government come forward to say stupid things like, oh, we should ban encryption. You think, well, then you can't have encryption. So there's all these issues which are not only make it difficult for them to get a grip on some of the issues around these nefarious advertisements and so on, but even they end up actually encroaching on completely law-abiding users' rights because they don't understand how this technology works.
And it turns into whack-a-mole because there are so many of them.
Absolutely. Every time you try and shut one down, they'll get around it. Tom, move us on to another story from The Sun on Sunday about therapy goats in prison.
Indeed. So there's a prisoner who's been put in charge of 2 therapy goats. This is a scheme that's going on.
So now we are saying goats, the animal.
The animal, yes. So they're taken into the cells as a way to calm inmates.
What do they do with them?
Well, the less said about that, the better. But apparently to calm them as they paint and do yoga. So this is part of a kind of holistic, quite hippie-ish sounding sort of means of keeping prisoners
lots of people
occupied.
take rabbits and cats and dogs into, for instance, old people's homes or care homes, because that's the only interaction they actually have with animals, with pets. But I never thought of therapy goats in a prison.
It's either also into the cell, them going up the flight of stairs, along
that doesn't sound right.
along the wing, into the door. I mean, it sounds a little bit implausible, but again, it's apparently part of this way to, again, calm prisoners. They can also take part in ukulele lessons. So I don't know if this is... I'm wondering whether this is part of the kind of influx of Just Stop Oil Extinction Rebellion people who are now making their own fun.
Well,
that's the sort of thing they'd be into.
Me and John were talking about this. We were sort of thinking, so let's get this straight. You come out of prison with the ability, to paint, do yoga, play the ukulele, and possibly be calm with a goat. I don't know how transferable those skills are.
The trouble is, it could be just a story chasing a cheap headline. In that, I imagine that it's done in prison as much as care homes, as we've been talking about. That anyone local who is already accredited, I presume, and has offered to take their animals in to hopefully have some sort of calming effect. That just happens where it's available. It's presumably not some dictat from
No, if it was being rolled out nationwide,
But I'm just really curious as to why goats. Because I think goats are wonderful, but they're not particularly calming, are they? They're not very well behaved.
These ones may be.
Well, they're pygmy goats. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, mini ghosts. Kids. They're kids. One thing that these sort of stories, they're a bit of an old chestnut. I think we have this idea that the prisoners should be shackled to the floor and showered with waste products.
I think we're just about to run out of time, but can we just, ever so quickly, Nikki, talk about the airline passenger who had a severe nut allergy?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Well, I share her nut allergy, so I absolutely empathise with the story. Her solution to the airline not banning nuts was to buy all the nuts available for sale. That's what she had to do.
She bought all of the nuts?
She bought £150 worth of nuts, which was more than the £50 flight cost.
Gosh,
Eurowings is the airline.
Eurowings. Because, recently when I was flying, they just don't serve nuts anymore.
And they often do an announcement.
You get these horrible little pretzels or whatever, but you don't get peanuts anymore because most airlines recognise the fact that if they've got a passenger on board with a nut allergy, it can be devastating for them.
I have the same allergy. I'm susceptible to the dust in nuts. It's not even eating it. So if somebody does open a packet of nuts around me, I can be very poorly. So, I sympathise with her, but I'd never actually come up with such a creative solution. Obviously, you've got to splash your cash, but it is one way of making sure you're safe.
She's also buying something she can't possibly consume.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, really.
No, I think we've run out of time there, have we? Yes. Right. Well, let's move on and just say thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for great variety of newspaper stories this morning. Shall we move on, though? Because this is fascinating. While London's property market is arguably in a state of crisis, one man's jubilation over his recent property purchase is slightly odd, to say the least, because he's bought a stairway to nowhere. quite literally. And he bought it at auction, sight unseen, for 25 grand.
Yeah, I watched this video last night. It's really, really inspiring because the new owner of the 4-storey metal stairwell, enclosed by translucent panels, has big plans to transform his acquisition into a series of pop-up businesses. And Simon Squibb joins us now to tell us more. Simon, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us on GB News Breakfast. Now, on the one hand, it's like, oh, my God, the world gone mad. Someone's paid 25 grand for a stairwell in London. But you've got bright plans for it. Tell us about why you're so inspired to buy what seems like a bit of a white elephant.
I know it seems like a joke, but actually it's quite a serious thing. A lot of people feel like they're in a stairway to nowhere. A lot of people don't have hope. A lot of people don't know how to make ends meet. And when I saw the stairway come up for sale, all sorts of analogies came up, like let's step up and help each other. You know, step by step, we can get where you want to go in life. And I think, of course, the property market is out of control, and that's not helping people. So I hope this is a full stop to the property market being out of control, and we can get that under control too. But my plan is to help people do what they love. And I know it sounds crazy that a stairwell can help people do that. But just on Friday, a few days ago, 50 people turned up to that stairwell, and we stood in the car park and listened to each other's stories. And then everybody in that group helped each other. And really, you can get anywhere with a little bit of help. The strongest people ask for help. And the symbolism of step by step, we can help each other was just too much for me to pass up. I had to buy it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've got lots of radio listeners listening as well, and they won't have seen it. And I've only just seen this. It's quite an interesting sort of building, if you like, in that it is a disused staircase inside a sort of glass... I don't know. How would you describe it?
I would describe it as a tower of hope. But in practicality, it is literally... it's actually 7 floors. Each main floor has a mid-floor, and so you can put 7 small businesses on every floor, for example, and people have already started sending in their dreams, what they'd like to do, and it's inspiring, it's exciting, and of course there's lots to do. We've got to clean it up so that it's nice and safe. We've got to get council permission to do such things. But I really love the idea of turning something that people see as a complete waste of time into something practical and useful, and finally start helping small businesses in this country, because we're not doing that right now.
And it was really interesting to watch your YouTube video where you kind of vox pop people that come along to the car park looking at it. You're asking them, how much do you think this is worth? And if you get it right, I'll give it to you, which is a bit of a brave thing to do, fair play to you. Nobody got the answer right, but some people were saying, oh, it must be worth £1 million. Because it's London, although one guy said 26 grand and he was £1,000 out from taking it off you. But talk us through the actual space, how much each person has, and what kind of enterprises, what kind of initiatives do you think will fill those spaces in your stairway?
So we have a part 2 coming out on that YouTube, and people might want to watch to see what happens. It is quite fascinating, people trying to guess the value of a staircase. And but I think the ideas that have come in have surpassed my expectations. We've had the wild, let's turn it into a fish tank, and let's turn it into a place that people can pretend to be a fireman for a day and jump down the side. We've had a cat cafe, garden centre, and some really inspiring practical businesses. People, one person, for example, wants to launch a clothing brand, and they want it to help people with mental health. And the clothes have a very positive energy. So they'll take one of the floors to put their clothes rack up and sell their clothes. Now, I have 3 million followers on social media, so I can, of course, amplify any small business that goes into the space and let people know that they're there. But it really is about symbolism. You know, with rents so high generally across the board, with small businesses suffering and no help for them, it really is as simple as giving people a little bit of hope. That's what I've noticed this staircase seems to represent. I did buy it initially as a practical item as well. I've launched a platform called helpbank.com. We have 75,000 people on that platform. We're helping each other for free. And I thought we need an office. So I thought, why not? Google started in a garage. Amazon started in a garage. Why couldn't helpbank.com start in a stairwell? Why not?
I think it sounds brilliant, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Richard Branson started Virgin in a telephone box, didn't he?
Well, there you go.
So, yeah, anything's possible. Did you say 7 stories high?
It's 4 stories, but there's 3 mid floors as you go up, so there's a landing between each of the floors.
But I mean, all of those different businesses, if that's how it ends up, are going to have to get on because they're going to have to walk through other people's, climb stairs through other people's spaces, aren't they?
Yeah, it'll be a good exercise. We've got an obesity problem in this country, so maybe we can help people get fit at the same time and do some fun exercise while helping small businesses.
Very quickly, before we say goodbye then, if people want to follow your story on, was it on YouTube?
YouTube, yeah.
What do they look for?
Well, you can go to simonsquib.com/step up if you want to book the space. And you can go on my YouTube, which is @SimonSquibb, and follow the journey of turning this staircase into hope for a lot of people.
Well, good luck with it. I'm sure you don't need the luck, but very good luck with it. And let's hope it really works. We'll follow your story with interest. You're watching Breakfast here on GB News. More to come.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Well, today will be more of a day of sunshine and showers with lighter winds around than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday's storm Anthony is already moving away to the southeast but could still bring some cloud and blustery conditions to parts of East Anglia through this morning. Elsewhere, we'll see cloud and showers soon bubbling up, and these could be heavy in a few places across Scotland, northern England, and with a chance of the odd thunderstorm across Northern Ireland. We're feeling much more pleasant today as well compared to yesterday, with those temperatures just creeping into the low 20s in the south. Now, as we go through the rest of this afternoon and into the evening, we'll see those showers starting to ease, becoming more confined to northern areas and plenty of clear spells around. Now, with clear spells and lighter winds, we'll see those temperatures dropping just a little bit more readily tonight. So towns and cities generally clinging on to those double figures, but more widely seeing temperatures into the mid-single figures in rural areas. This will mean it'll be a bright but chilly start to the new week. Plenty of sunshine around. There could still be the odd shower developing, heaviest across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. But with those light winds and that sunshine around, feeling even more pleasant as we go into the new week, with those temperatures just starting to climb a little bit more into the 20s, with a high of 23 in the southeast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. I know, yeah. Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant,
the big green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Sunday the 6th of August. Today, the word is sabotage. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has accused Keir Starmer of sabotaging her efforts to end the migrant channel crossings using what she calls his web of cronies.
And the home of former Foreign Secretary Lord Castlereagh, Mount Stewart, opens to tourists in Northern Ireland this summer over 200 years after his death.
And we still want to hear your stories on reserving a sunbed during your holiday. Have you ever been, like Martin here, a sunbed hogger?
And the big question is, how will the weather look like for today? Can't be as bad as yesterday. Here's Rachel Ayres from the Met Office.
It was an unsettled start to the weekend with Storm Anthony crossing the UK, but it looks like a drier and brighter second half for us across the UK. Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
Whatever the weather, wherever you are in the world, and whether you're nipping out to reserve a sunbed, you're hopefully joining us here on GB News. I'm Nan Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
The sunbed hogging stories continue to come in, but I tell you what, this one's interesting. Annette in Wrexham says, about 30 years ago, we went to Mallorca at a time when a football match was being played between England and Germany. Going to breakfast on match day, we were surprised when we went into the guest lounge, there were towels reserving the seats in the lounge.
There you go. And Stuart says, I'm currently in the Algarve and we are amazed at watching the military plans of these huggers, sending children down with arms stacked with towels, dragging out all the best beds, sweeping chairs and tables, all before 9 a.m. That sounds just like me and my kids.
Oh. Paul says, we're watching you on a lovely warm beach in Thailand. We settled here 20 years ago, 6 hours ahead of you in the UK, so your award-winning breakfast show is ideal for post-lunch relaxing.
Oh, nice.
Loving the programme.
That
sounds glorious. I wonder if you've had to reserve your sunbed. Or whether you've done what some people are now beginning to point out quite a lot is, if you really can't stand the sunbed fiasco, rent a villa instead, and then you've got your own pool and your own sunbeds.
Yeah, but the sunbed fiasco for me is all part of the fun. It's all part of the energy.
Yeah, you like the competition,
I do. I like all the sharp elbows. Send the kids down. They've got to pay their way.
Yeah. No. Let's move on to serious subjects. Actually, sunbeds turn out to be a very serious subject this morning, but we'll move on. The Bank of England has increased interest rates for the 14th time in a row on Thursday to 5.25%.
Yeah, the bank's forecasts are confident the government's pledge to halve inflation by the end of the year will be met, and that the rises will successfully ward off a recession.
Yes, well, let's find out more about this. We're going to be able to find out more about it in a few minutes' time, actually, from Camilla Tominey, who's getting ready for her programme. programme. And that's the point, Camilla, isn't it? You were going to turn this into a big economy programme.
Yes.
But other things have, as ever, in the world of politics.
Well, you've got to keep up with the news, haven't you, when you're doing live television? So, obviously, all of the papers are dominated by Suella Braverman's interview and interventions on the immigration crisis. This idea of blaming Labour. I'm wondering what our audience thinks of that, because I think I've got Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, coming on. And on one hand, I know that GB viewers and listeners are obviously behind what he's trying to do. So they're behind the intention, but I'm not sure they support the execution. I mean, still nothing's happened. Labour have got a good attack line in the papers. They're saying, you know, the government has sent more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than actual deportees.
Oh, that's a very good line.
That's good.
Having said that, I also think there is sympathy with Braverman's view that some of these lawyers are basically putting a massive blockade in the way of any of the government's plans. And I do think it's right to say there's a piece in the Express talking about one particular Labour councillor who's also one of these people who is trying to stop the government from stopping the boats, that on the left, there's a huge amount of kind of prevarication over this issue. Are all migrants asylum seekers? They can't seem to decide that. They don't seem to be able to be open to the space that sometimes particularly young men are coming over here just for a job. They're not coming because they're being persecuted by anyone. We've had a huge operation going on in the Mail newspaper trying to pinpoint some of these immigration lawyers who are basically totally gaming the system.
And friends of Keir Starmer in some cases.
Well, going undercover and seeing these lawyers basically saying, right, you're going to have to make up this, this and this in order to stay in the country. This enrages the electorate, but at the same time there is this perception that the government still hasn't got a grip. It's trying its best, but it's not getting anywhere. And I think that's what I need to put to Jenrick. When are you sending someone to Rwanda? And how does this Bibi Stockholm barge help when it can only house 500 migrants and only in June 2,000 landed by boat?
And I wonder if something else you put to Ms Jenrick is an extraordinary line of attack in the same Express piece. Braverman accuses Starmer of successfully campaigning to halt this government's attempts to deport vile foreign criminals, including rapists and murderers.
Yeah, it's quite
a total betrayal of their victims. That, of course, pertains to that 2020 flights to Jamaica that Sir Keir Starmer signed the letter to help ground it, one of whom went on to commit murder. This is quite down and dirty politics.
Also, I don't think the public is particularly in support of Labour politicians or anyone trying to ground flights of people who are meant to be leaving here. Again, there's a perception that they're gaming the system to claim human rights, even though they themselves may be criminals who have had a complete wanton disregard for other people's human rights. So we're going to be covering all of that. But look, the cost of living crisis still remains, and I think people are going to get increasingly concerned with the weather turning. Are we going to have a summer? I appreciate we've got our radiators off for now, but when it comes to September, October, November, people are going to be worried about their energy bills again. So I'm going to be speaking to Kwasi Kwarteng. I know that's controversial because people do blame him for this. Now, I think it's the highest interest rate we've had now at 5.25 in 15 years. Is that his fault? Is it Liz Truss's?
Well,
is it a wider problem with the economy?
How many days were they in power?
47.
I mean, we can't keep going on, can we, saying 47 days in power made that much of a difference. We could have recovered by now, couldn't we?
Well, also, if you look at the gilt yields, which is apparently the kind of, like, marker of how well we're doing, they're higher now than they were under Truss and Kwarteng. I think people, again, quite like the ideas, but not the execution. Is this a recurrent problem with the Tory government that has the right ideas but can't seem to put them into plan? I'll also be speaking to Roger Bootle, who's a leading economist on this whole issue, and try and find out where does he think interest rates are going to remain. Are we now facing the next 2, 5, 10 years at rates at around 5%? Was this historic low that we witnessed since the crash in 2008 completely distorting the entire system? What are his ideas for growth? I'm also going to be speaking to a Blairite. Sir Stephen Timms is coming on. He was Blair's last Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Let's find out what Labour's ideas are on the economy, because I'm a bit confused.
Well, we haven't really heard any policies yet, have we? So Starmer is kind of sitting on the sidelines, biding his time, hoping the Tories implode. But a bit of detail would be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be nice. And then the other great guest we've got on, who's been in Parliament for 36 years, Sir John Redwood, advised Margaret Thatcher on her... Well, I'm going to ask John, because he was Thatcher's policy advisor, what does he think Thatcher would make of net zero? That's the other big debate in the newspapers today. Is it costing us too much? We've got Labour and the Conservatives at loggerheads over this issue because of what happened in Uxbridge and ULEZ. So let's find out
they don't
from John.
know how to position themselves on this, do they?
Also, interestingly, I think both Starmer and Sunak now are kind of vying for support on the right, but finding it very difficult to kind of land some of those pledges because you've got a load of Tories just staying at home. So I'd like to ask John Redwood, you know, what would Thatcher make of net zero and indeed of Rishi Sunak? So let's find out a bit later from 9:30.
That'll be fascinating. There's a poll in the Express today which shows support is slipping when people are finding out the cost.
It will quite. I mean, I think everybody wants to do their best. And by the way, people in Britain generally do. We are a nation of people that separate their recycling and care about the environment
really
deeply. And I think the Blair argument still resonates, doesn't it? He was the one who said last week, well, we can do what we can, but what about China?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to be defeatist, but it's a good question.
No, but it was a good point, wasn't it? Yeah, I think a lot of people think that about green issues. You know, that, like you say, we bust a gut to recycle and turn the lights off, but when's China going to do something that's going to be really meaningful? Well. Right, Camilla, look forward to that. We'll let you go and
show.
Get everybody ready. That John Redwood interview will be a corker, I'll bet you, because I'm sure he's feeling as though somebody needs to be outspoken. Shall we move over to Northern Ireland? I was just about to do. No? Yes? No? I think so. Yeah, we're going to go to Castlereagh House, which has just been opened to the public, or is going to be opening to the public very soon. In fact, I said earlier in the programme that places, these enormous piles like Castlereagh House, they're just big, dark houses with big portraits of men on horseback. Well, I've had a message from David who said, nothing could be further from the truth where I work. I invite one or both of you to visit us, and you will see many men and women who were formidable, but many were females too. So he said, I work as a guide at one of the most foremost castles. Love to know which one. Thanks very much for getting in touch.
And lots of people have been in touch on Channel Migrants, the big topic. Della says, I don't trust either of the main parties to stop the boats.
So who do you vote for?
Well, this is the big question.
Yeah. OK, over to Northern Ireland now, the home of former Foreign Secretary Lord Castlereagh, but a long time ago, is open to tourists in Northern Ireland this summer, over 200 years now after his death.
Yeah, he was the Minister for War during the Napoleonic era and reshaped Europe by overseeing the Acts of the Union and the end of the 1812 American War. Our legendary Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, has paid a visit.
All of us are only here for a short time, but the roads and structures left behind are portholes into the past, and some of us achieve much more than others. Lord Castlereagh's life was played out on a world stage and would leave his mark to this very day. Castlereagh was born into the Stewart family in Dublin, although he spent most of his life right here in Mount Stewart. He lived in extraordinary times and would rise through the political ranks in Britain.
He felt intensively Irish. At the same time, he felt that Ireland deserved to be a part of a bigger and more powerful unit, which was at that time the British Empire. He saw in the Napoleonic Wars how the British Empire could not only ally itself with Europe, but also lead Europe.
Peter Lawrenson is married into the Stewart family and is a historical expert on it.
He felt of himself much more as a diplomat than a politician. It's one of the reasons why the King proposed that if Lord Liverpool resigned, the King, George IV, would make Castlereagh his Prime Minister. And Castlereagh said, no thanks. Thank you very much, Your Majesty, but no thanks.
As well as appointing such men as Nelson and Wellington, he set up unthinkable coalitions and ensured the Pope that all the Vatican's wealth would be returned from Napoleon's armies.
As Secretary of War, he had put together a thing called the Sex Coalition with Britain and its allies against Napoleon. That is to say, the armies of Imperial Russia, the armies of the Austrian Empire, and the armies of the Prussian Empire. And in the course of that, he became personal friend of the monarchs involved, the Tsar, the Kaiser, and the King of Prussia.
The boy that grew up in Newtownards would set in place the Acts of the Union and end the American War of 1812.
And even more remarkable for an American like myself, it was he who brought to an end the War of 1812, which many of us have forgotten about. The principal negotiator for the end of the war from the American side was a remarkable man called John Quincy Adams, became America's 6th president, and he said, "I bring this war to an end because I trust the word of Lord Castlereagh." This is a very little known link between America and Northern Ireland, but an important one. Because as much as the Congress of Vienna prevented the British from fighting any wars on the continent for 100 years until the First World War, it is also the birth of the special relationship, because no British army has had to fight an American army for 200 years, right down to the present day.
Tuki Biddy, GB News, Mount Stewart.
Fancy being Minister of War during the Napoleonic era.
Amazing.
That's not a big job, is it?
Just a bit.
Fascinating, isn't it? Castlereagh House there.
OK, you're with Breakfast on GB News. Stick with us. We'll be right back in 3.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News with Anne and Martin. And of all of the things we've been talking about today, asylum seekers or illegal immigrants and all of the things we were going to talk about. The subject of sunbeds and sunbed hogging has played very big in the programme today. It seems that it really does affect your holiday. If you've gone on holiday somewhere to stay at a hotel or a resort and you find that other people are hogging the sunbeds and you can never get to them, and then maybe you find that behaviour forces you into the same situation of having to do the same, as you would probably say you do it because you have to do it, yeah? Yeah,
I do, and also I think it's all part of the sport, it's part of the fun.
It's not meant to be.
I like the international competition of beating the Germans to, or whoever the nation may be.
Well, exactly.
And I send my children downstairs early, they always wake up early on holiday, they're very excited. I said, well, before breakfast, go and get that lounger there. Yeah, the fourth one on the right, by the pool, yeah, in the primo spot. I'd like to do it, it's all part of the fun for me, and I've had some criticism, but a lot of people agree too.
Oh, yeah, well, Stuart says, I'm currently in the Algarve, and we are amazed at watching the almost military plans of these sunbed hoggers. They're sending children down, their arms stacked with towels, dragging the best beds, swapping chairs and tables, and all before 9 a.m.
Yeah, and here's Kath saying, we tackled this problem at our apartment complex by throwing all the towels in the pool. We have a civilised queuing system opening at 8:30 each morning, so basically if people jump the queue, Kath chucks their towels in the pool. That's direct action.
But it's direct action, but that could get really nasty. And then that, again, blights your holiday, doesn't it?
Yep.
I mean, Barbara says, if I had paid a few £1,000s for a holiday, I think I'm entitled to go and grab a sunbed.
Yeah, and here's another one from Jeff, echoing that early sentiment. As a soldier in the 70s and 80s, a group of us would all often go on holiday together. We would return to the hotel quite late most nights and throw all of the towels on the sunbeds into the pools. We didn't even bother to keep it a secret, but nobody ever said anything. We never actually sat around the pool. I don't suppose they'd disagree with a group of squaddies, would they?
No, you wouldn't want to, would you?
3 in the morning.
Joanna's interested as well. And in fact, if you were like Joanna, you probably would always be able to get a sunbed. She chooses the unwanted sunbeds that are in the shade, she says, because she says, why would anyone want to lie on a sunbed for long periods of time? Haven't they heard about the risks of skin cancer?
Yeah, but you want to go away on holiday and enjoy that sun. And I think the sun feels different abroad. It feels much more powerful.
It's reliable.
Yeah, it's reliable, it's there, unlike our weather. And I think at the moment, the sunbed war is going to escalate because people want to secure a little piece of England in the corner of Spain, in the corner of Tenerife, wherever it is.
Years ago, says Albie, morning Albie, we stayed at a hotel in Cyprus. Every room had its allocated sunbeds and umbrella. And if you went out for the day, when you returned, your sunbed and umbrella would always be available, all monitored by brilliant pool attendants. I like that idea. That's very posh, isn't it? It's a bit like we were hearing from somebody earlier who goes to Sandals Resort, where you can, I presume if you pay sort of concierge rates for your room, you get a butler, and you can send your butler out to reserve a sunbed for you. I think that's really the way to do it.
Well, you see, but that is paying other people to do your dirty work and then making
Yeah, but they're doing it officially. It's only dirty work if you're doing it sort of, your own way.
But if I use my children, who I pay for, I'm a bad guy. If they use a butler, who they pay for, they're the good guys. No. I think that's how the other half...
Well, in a way, it is actually saying you get it if you pay for it, then. Yeah. Because Ted says, we stayed in a hotel in Tenerife last year, and they had a booking system where you could book your bed the day before, your sunbed, the day before, on a very sophisticated booking screen. It worked very well.
Yeah, and we haven't just been talking about sunbeds all morning. Well, to be fair, it has really got you going, and why not? It does. Coming up soon, of course, the Camilla Tommy Show. Big top topic today is migration, channel migrants. Loads of views have been coming in on that. Graham in Bradford says what they should be doing is turning the boats around and sending them back before they even get to our border.
Yeah, great idea, but how do you do it?
People keep saying that should be done because, of course, the big political row today, Suella Braverman accusing Starmer of having a web of cronies preventing deportations, attacking him personally as blocking the deportation of even murderers and rapists. Really dirty politics. Lots to talk about in the Camilla Tommy Show. It's a huge, huge issue. It seems that nobody knows who to trust on this topic.
No, absolutely. Nobody knows whether anything actually can ever get done now. We were talking also earlier about the wonderful pictures from the Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, because it's been looking out much, much further into space. And it came up with the extraordinary picture, which to us looks like a very, very distant couple of galaxies, which are shaped like an enormous question mark. So we were talking to our space expert, Andy Lowndes, about it, and he was explaining that it's the interaction of two galaxies that's twisting, and it just happens to look like a question mark, but it looks really weird there, hovering in space. Mary says, does anyone else think this is all a waste of money? You know, space telescopes and whatever. There are so many ways money could be spent better.
Yeah, and very funny comment from Wendy here, pulling in 2 comments. Rishi Sunak will never stop the space boats arriving at Earth UK if there is life out there. Nice one, Wendy. I see what you did there.
Yeah, but if they arrived, at least we'd know that they were there. Darryl says, why is it always supposed that if we made extraterrestrial contact, it would be beneficial to mankind? I tell you what's more important, though. You'll probably want to know what the weather's going to be like as we say goodbye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Well, today will be more of a day of sunshine and showers with lighter winds around than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday's storm Anthony is already moving away to the southeast but could still bring some cloud and blustery conditions to parts of East Anglia through this morning. Elsewhere, we'll see cloud and showers soon bubbling up, and these could be heavy in a few places across Scotland, Northern England, and with a chance of the odd thunderstorm across Northern Ireland. We're feeling much more pleasant today as well compared to yesterday, with those temperatures just creeping into the low 20s in the south. Now, as we go through the rest of this afternoon and into the evening, we'll see those showers starting to ease, becoming more confined to northern areas and plenty of clear spells around. Now, with clear spells and lighter winds, we'll see those temperatures dropping just a little bit more readily tonight. So towns and cities generally clinging on to those double figures, but more widely seeing temperatures into the mid-single figures in rural areas. This will mean it'll be a bright but chilly start to the new week. Plenty of sunshine around. There could still be the odd shower developing, heaviest across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. But with those light winds and that sunshine around, feeling even more pleasant as we go into the new week, with those temperatures just starting to climb a little bit more into the 20s, with a high of 23 in the southeast.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight.